Hello and welcome to another random request reaction stream. Well, random YouTube video request reaction stream. It's actually the first one on this channel since we moved from the old Dane channel. So I guess I'll reintroduce the gist of it. So on this stream I do videos that I don't get to do on my Sunday stream, which means like no music on the stream, but it can be longer videos up to 30 minutes, and it can be like history, news, video essay, fails, animals, nature, science, technology, you know, sports, like anything like that, you know, different videos that are on YouTube but I don't get to watch on the other stream. Yeah, that's really the gist of it. And you can also share as many as you want and then I'll pick from your videos. So I don't guarantee that I'll do every request like I do on the Sunday stream. But here you can actually share more than one video and then I take it if I feel like watching it. I mean, that's the gist of it. So as always, there'll be timestamps in the video description and comments with the links to the original videos. Link to my Discord if you want to follow me. Right here, the Discord. Then we have the stream element and the Patreon, where you can vote on Patreon for like reactions. Every week I have a poll. One time it's like movie reaction, one time it's anime. You can vote for free. And if you join paid, you have different rewards which you can take a look. Some of them are like video reaction requests every month. Some of them are like request an anime, request a movie. Consider it. Let's see, we have a new request right here. Let's take that. Okay, so yeah, to give you an idea of some of the stuff that I got already, we have this. So quite a few things that I opened myself because I didn't see too many requests, so I figured I would open some stuff in case. But yeah, we'll start with the actual request in this order, yeah. What else was I gonna say? Oh, Neflair. Let me just reply to that. I will do it again next week for sure. Yep. I'm gonna do more Newtown, don't worry. Obviously, you guys know it's kind of a weird timeline right now with me losing the main channel. Actually, it's dead tomorrow. Except if there's a miracle, but there's no miracle. So you know, I'm kind of struggling with that right now. It's such an hard blow, despite me trying to be positive and all that. Yeah, it is an hard blow. I can't lie. It is what it is. Anyway, enough yapping for me. Let's get into the reaction. We're starting with some interesting one. So, how to lay siege to a samurai castle in the late Sengoku period. Man, interesting. I didn't think they would have, I don't know what it's called in English, but you know, the ditch with water around it. I kind of picture that as more of a Western castle kind of design style, you know, by Sound Roman History.
Siege warfare in Japan differed fundamentally from that in Europe. While European sieges were revolutionized at the end of the Middle Ages by the emergence of artillery and bastion forts, guns and siege engines played only a minor role in Japan. Instead, Japanese armies often favored direct assault tactics to capture fortresses. Japanese castles were also designed with a different defensive approach in mind. Rather than relying on a massive outer wall to stop the enemy as in Europe, Japanese defenses were based on the principle
As I would say, yeah, the walls always seem pretty low.
Of defense in depth. Attackers were forced to navigate a carefully engineered labyrinth of death, where defenders launched counterattacks, ambushes, and rained down stones, arrows, and bullets. The second half of the 16th century witnessed numerous spectacular sieges.
Look at this design. I mean, the castle part in the middle itself is almost like on a Venice-like island. I mean, that's interesting.
During which fortresses were burned, undermined, or even deliberately flooded. In this video, we explore how to lay siege to a Japanese castle during the Sengoku period. The Onin War broke out in Japan in 1467. Its most significant clashes occurred in and around the then capital, Kyoto, where allegedly over 200,000 fighters from two rival clans
That's a lot.
engaged in what can be best described as a massive street battle that lasted more than a decade. By the war's end, Kyoto was in ruins, and so was the authority of the emperor. The political and social order collapsed, plunging Japan into chaos. Soon, dozens of rival lords, known as daimyo, competed for power. During this period, known as the Sengoku or Warring States period, political legitimacy was based.
Which, there's something funny that I always kind of knew, but Mark Elf, one of the big commenters on the channel, elaborated recently is that in Japan, one of the expressions that people use about everything is that everything is the Sengoku, the Warring State. So like there's the idle Sengoku period and the this and that Sengoku period, because it just works, right? Like it's when there's a lot of fighting, a lot of variety,
solely on military strength. To consolidate their positions, the more ambitious lords began constructing vast networks of fortifications. According to some estimates, nearly 40,000 castles of various sizes were built during the Sengoku period. Amid the struggle for power, these small strongholds changed hands regularly, making siege warfare more important in Japanese warfare than ever before. When we talk about Japanese castles during the Sengoku period, we are not referring to grand iconic structures like the Himeji castle. These impressive architectural symbols of wealth and authority only began to appear during the more tranquil years following 1600 under the Tokugawa shogunate. Until the mid-16th century, most Japanese castles were what is known as yamashiro, simple mountain fortresses made of wood and earth. A key principle of Japanese military architecture.
So yeah, castle is maybe it's still accurate, right? But when we think of castle, we think of Western castle, right? This giant stone walls and, the big drawbridge and the water and the guard towers and, all that, right? But I guess, this is I guess it's probably still called the castle, but it feels so different in concept.
Was that a castle's strength lay not in the way it was built, but in its location. Because of this, building sites were deliberately chosen for their lack of accessibility. In the case of Yamashiro, literally mountain castles. Two abundant natural resources in Japan were utilized: wood and mountains. These castles were literally built out of the mountain. First, one or more peaks were cleared and flattened to create plateaus. Then the mountain slopes were transformed into simple fortifications. Ditches were dug between individual hilltops and sometimes even filled with water by diverting mountain streams. The individual fortified areas were connected by bridges that could be dismantled or raised at a moment's notice. Finally, the felled wood was used to construct simple structures: palisades, gates, platforms, towers, and various residential and storage buildings. A reasonably well-preserved example of a Yamashiro is Takeda Castle. From the mid-16th century onward, wealthy daimyos began reinforcing the mountain slopes with layers of stones and replacing palisades and wooden walls with plastered, wattle and daub constructions, as seen in this case. This innovation addressed the greatest weakness of the Yamashiro, its instability, because the simple earthen foundations were prone to erosion and undercutting. They could only support small, lightweight structures. To solve this, builders covered the mountain flanks with a layer of pebbles before cladding them with solid dry stone walls. This gently sloping stone foundation enabled the construction of larger, sturdier buildings, laying the groundwork for the development of the traditional Japanese castles we know today. According to the historian Paul Varley, this innovation marked the beginning of, quote, the great age of castle building in Japan. The fortresses built in the second half of the century impressed European missionaries and merchant travelers who visited Japan. With their massive stone walls, these castles reminded them of the artillery fortresses common in Europe at the time, known as bastion forts or star forts. Their defining features were low, massive walls, with bastions designed to withstand.
Yet I've never actually seen something like this. I don't know if we had that many in France like this. You see castles all over the place. I used to live in the south, and again, like in my small village, I didn't have to go more than like 30 minutes before finding like a castle. I talked about it before, but there was like a city close to where I live where there was Roman ruins and a massive medieval castle ruins. Ruins. Like the castle was still like, you know, there was a good amount of it. The Roman ruins were like just pillars and a little bit of like an auditorium maybe kind of place, but never actually, you know, came across like that kind of design. Usually it's just like the single castle atop a hill, you know.
Sustained cannon fire and eliminate any blind spots for the defenders' artillery. Sieges on these fortresses were waged with shovels and guns, and often ended when the city wall was breached. Now, while the walls of Japan's largest fortresses indeed resembled European bastions, their purpose was fundamentally different. In Japan, artillery played hardly any role in siege warfare. At most, an attacker brought a few catapults, and even these were primarily used as anti-personnel weapons, rather than to destroy walls and fortifications. According to Thomas Conlon, an expert on Japanese warfare, the Japanese quickly recognized the effectiveness of Western cannons, but it took considerable time before these weapons were fully integrated into their arsenal. It was not until the siege of Osaka in 1614 that bombardment tactics comparable to those in Europe were employed. Until then, Japanese commanders preferred to rely on mass infantry assaults, precisely the type of assault the fortresses of the period were designed to withstand. The evolution of Japanese siege tactic reminds us that every era develops its own form of strategic thinking. The same emphasis on positioning, timing, and intelligent command is at the heart of Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus.
Okay.
We'd like to thank for sponsoring this video. What makes Tacticus great is not just the Warhammer setting, which I'm a fan of, but that it offers a fast-paced, turn-based gameplay that does require thinking ahead and using strategy. It's not one of those games which plays itself. If you do not position your characters well enough, or if you don't have the right team comp, you're not going to succeed. Tacticus' like gameplay cycle of unlocking progression and achievement is rewarding because it allows you to customize your forces and deploy increasingly powerful units with unique abilities, each with their own specific traits and strategy. Currently, there are more than 90 champions from 20 playable factions available. On top of the PvE campaigns, such as the Fall of Cadia, there are also PvP live events and guild raids, and an ever-expanding roster of factions and champions. While you can play and enjoy Tacticus for free, there are in-game paid unlocks available, which often come with a regular discount, and which I found can be worthwhile if you're wanting those later campaigns right from the get-go, or if you wish to play as a certain faction from the very beginning, ready to take the battle to the Warhammer universe. Use the QR code on screen, click the links down below, and join Tacticus today. The tactical principle underlying Japanese castles was defense in depth. Unlike European artillery fortresses designed to stop an attacker at an impregnable outer line of defense, Japanese castles were not meant to halt the enemy at a single barrier. Instead, they consisted of multiple levels, sometimes referred to as tiers, that attackers had to conquer one by one. The defenders...
Which obviously I'm not going to talk like I know anything, but just guessing, looking at the design right here, like, it actually makes a lot more sense. For all the archers, for example, defending the castle, it's probably hard to hit anyone when they're like all spread out outside. But if you let them get into one of the small walled parts, and you know, you can just get on the wall, like it's much easier to target them, right? So it's kind of like bottling them up. That makes a lot of sense.
Would confront them, retreat strategically, and then counterattack to slowly wear them down. If the defense held, the enemy was routed before reaching the castle's heart. So, unlike with European fortresses, battles were fought not only in front of the walls, but also within the castle itself. The principle of defense in depth wasn't limited to individual castles, it also shaped castle building on a strategic level. Apart from their main strongholds, the daimyos built dozens of smaller satellite castles scattered across their territories. These formed a web of obstacles, forcing an invading army to engage with multiple fortified points. Hence, the intruder had to conquer or destroy every single fortress in its path.
Which sounds like such a pain, right? I mean, you've got like all these tiny, not very important castles, but at the same time, it's like, if you put it under siege, you need a lot of men to do that. You can't ignore it because then the guys on there can eventually come back behind you. And if you attack, sure, it's not the craziest castle, but it's still like casualties. So yeah, it's really like a system of slow attrition of forces, right, of the advancing army. Yeah, and then they eventually have to get to the big castle.
Otherwise, the garrisons could later strike at their supply lines from behind. A single small border castle might not stop an invader, but it drained resources, tied down soldiers, and cost precious time. Multiply that by dozens of such castles,
Yeah.
and even the most determined advance could be slowed or even brought to a halt. A famous example of such a castle network is the fortresses of the influential Hojo clan. Their main castle was in Odawara at Sagami Bay. As the clan's largest and most prominent fortress, Odawara stood at the head of a sprawling network of satellite castles, most of which were controlled by family members. These satellites operated independently in day-to-day affairs, but coordinated closely with Odawara to manage and defend the clan's territory. One of the most important first-rank satellites was Yamanaka Castle, which was attacked by Toyotomi Hideyoshi in 1590 and overrun in a single day. Beneath these first-rank satellites were sub-satellites, typically small mountain castles, and finally, at the outer edge of the Hojo territory, basic outposts, torides, which served primarily as rallying points for local troops. Such networks could expand to include dozens of castles, forming a complex and deeply layered system of regional defense. Another key difference between Japanese and European fortress architecture was that Japanese castles served almost exclusively military purposes. Unlike the fortress cities of Europe and China, which combined military, economic, and civilian functions, Japan had no such multi-purpose strongholds until the late 16th century. Japanese castles primarily functioned as defensive strongholds and administrative centers rather than as shelters for the broader population. As time went on, fewer and fewer daimyos concentrated power in their own hands. They expanded their territories and raised ever larger.
Like in a way, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. Like in a way, it's only the army people fighting. There's no civilian around, you know? So there's a lot less civilian deaths compared to some of the European siege, right? Where like, you know, the population starve or is caught in the fighting, and that's pretty terrible, yeah.
Armies. Most traditional Yamashiro were too small as rallying points for thousands or even tens of thousands of troops. As a result, starting in the 1570s, warlords began to move into the plains, where they constructed new fortresses that not only served their military needs, but also showcased their authority and wealth. Alongside the modernized mountain castles, two new types rose to prominence: the Hirajiro, or plain castle, built on flat terrain and surrounded by moats and earthen ramparts, and the Hirayamajiro, a hilltop castle constructed on a hill within a...
Kind of a random thought, but I wonder what is the strongest castle in human history, yeah? Like there must be one castle in one country that was built in such a perfect defensive manner that, you know, it's gonna attack many times but never actually defeated or something. It's probably one that's like at the top of a perfect mountain where, you know, you have only one road to get to it, and then the entrance to it is like this crazy wall, and it's like impregnable, and it's like too small of a road to bring any kind of siege artillery or siege weapon or anything. It's probably something like that, yeah.
Plain. One of the earliest representations of this new, functional, and representative generation of castles was Atsuki Castle, built by Oda Nobunaga, the first of Japan's great unifiers in 1576. Commanding structures like Atsuki became the stages for some of the most spectacular sieges of the Sengoku period. There was no single blueprint for Japanese castles. They came in many forms and shapes.
Man, this stream makes me want to play Mountain Blade. Like one of the Japanese one, I think it was Gekijo maybe. Though I guess now there's Mountain Blade too, but you know, I don't know if there's Japanese conversion mode for that one.
Molded by their surrounding landscapes and the needs of their owners. Yet despite their differences, they shared one crucial feature. All were built on the principle of defense in depth. Every fortress was divided into multiple baileys, or courtyards, which attackers had to capture one by one. This shared structure allows us to define an ideal type, a simplified model that brings together the key defensive features common to many castles of the late Sengoku period. In very simple terms, the castles of this period typically consisted of the main bailey, surrounded by several outer baileys. The most common layouts were the ring style, the compound style, and the stepped style, which was usually built on or next to a hill. Since asymmetrically arranged hill forts were most common in the late 16th century, our ideal type is the Hirayamajiro in the Teikakushiki, or stepped style. The centerpiece of such a castle was the keep, or tenshu, which stood prominently in the main bailey. Up to 7 stories high, it towered over the entire complex.
Looks amazing
It could be
too.
seen for miles. The Tenshu served multiple purposes. It was an elevated lookout, a symbol of the daimyo's power, a secure storage area, and most importantly, the final stronghold in case of attack. The baileys were arranged like steps, each with a stone wall forming the front, topped by a wattle and daub wall, featuring embrasures, triangular for firearms, and rectangular for bows. Just behind these walls, rows of trees shielded defenders from incoming projectiles. In the event of a prolonged siege, these could be used as fire and building materials. At key points, such as corners, towers reinforced the walls, further strengthening the defense. The baileys were connected by stairs and paths, forming a labyrinth of walls and gates that both visitors and intruders had to navigate to reach the main bailey. An outstandingly complex example of this is Himeji Castle. Built somewhat later, it presented attackers with the daunting task of passing through 21 gates before reaching the heart of the fortress. Some of these were virtually impassable. The strongest gatehouses functioned like sluices. Attackers entered a small courtyard through a first gate, which was then closed behind.
I guess now I think about it, I've experienced this in the game Samurai Warriors, yeah. The Dynasty Warriors spin-off based on the, usually the Sengoku era of Japan. And now that I think about it, yeah, some of the castle siege missions are kind of like this, where like you have to one by one clear like one of these baileys as they called it, and then open a gate or something, continue to another one, defeat the commander, clear the troops. Yeah. I've experienced that in a game, so it's not quite the same level of harshness, right? Dynasty Warrior is really, easy. It's just one swing kills 100 people, right? But yeah, I guess I've experienced that a bit in that game.
Them before they could proceed through a second gate. This system gave defenders precise control over who was allowed inside. The outermost line of defense was a moat, which either held water or, as in our example, featured the distinctive tatami-like network of ridges and gorges.
That was kind of
the
crazy.
Architecture of such a fortress was geared towards neutralizing the attacker's most significant advantage, his numerical superiority. Narrow, winding paths and cleverly placed obstacles forced invaders to break into smaller groups, making them easy targets for the garrison, which was poised to strike quickly and unexpectedly. The defenders relied on their mobility, using ambushes, lunges, and sudden counterattacks to devastating effect. Familiar with every inch of the castle and its surroundings, they held a tremendous advantage over the invading force. Despite their many differences, Japanese castles shared several key features with European fortresses. Both acted as force multipliers, allowing small garrisons to hold off vastly superior enemy forces, or at least inflict heavy losses on them. Attacking even a small castle required immense manpower, time, and resources, which is why Japanese commanders avoided sieges whenever possible. They were considered exhausting, costly, and risky. As a result, most attacks on fortified places began with negotiations. Once the attackers had surrounded the castle, the leaders of both sides would meet to seek a diplomatic solution. Only when talks failed would battle break out.
Wouldn't talk fail most of the time.
It was already clear that the defenders had no chance. Attackers often overran them outright. For example, Takeda Nobutora, father of the famous Takeda Shingen, is said to have destroyed 36 castles in a single day. Even if most of these were small outposts that were burned down or surrendered quickly, and the accounts are exaggerated, this remains an impressive feat. When the attacker lacked clear superiority or a direct infantry assault was impossible for other reasons, commanders had a range of elaborate but effective alternatives to fall back on. The first step was to transform the encirclement into a complete siege line. This was one of the stages of a siege that closely resembles Western methods, where attackers gradually advanced a network of trenches toward a fortress while their artillery provided cover. In Japan, the siege line served as a launching for further operations and was extended as needed. To create elevated positions for their archers, attackers built artificial mounds or constructed towers, some of which were even mounted on wheels. Unlike Western siege towers, however, there is no evidence that they were used to scale walls. Instead, they provided elevated platforms for arquebusiers and archers to suppress the defenders' fire. This allowed their comrades to move forward to fill in trenches, build ramps, or erect advanced breastworks. As they
Alright.
progressed, the attackers protected themselves against projectiles with various mobile walls and
Bamboo
shields.
walls.
For example, the so-called tate, the Japanese equivalent of European pavizes.
That
The siege
literally
of
means
Otsu
shield.
in October of 1600 demonstrated just how decisive establishing a solid siege line and methodical advance could be. Otsu was a fujo, a fortified complex near a river or lake that had piers
that looks
and was
crazy.
situated on Lake Biwa, Japanese largest freshwater lake. The castle stretched across several islands, connected to the shore only by 4 heavily defended bridges. According to contemporary reports, to work around this obstacle, the attackers began filling in the outermost moat with a small battery on a nearby hill providing covering fire. Unfortunately, nothing is known
Look
about
at
these
this thing.
guns beyond their existence. Nevertheless, Otsu was among the first sieges in Japan to see the use of modern black powder artillery. The attackers' tactics proved effective. Once they reached the outer bailey, they quickly captured it, and it was only a matter of days before the defenders surrendered. One man who frequently conducted elaborate siege operations was Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the second great unifier of Japan. Some of the most spectacular sieges in
finished
Japanese
when they
history
started.
unfolded under his command. Generals like him had an extensive strategic arsenal at their disposal, including, but not limited to, assaults, bribery, arson, and impressive engineering feats. Deep mining, for example, falls into this latter category.
Oh.
This labor-intensive method involved digging tunnels to collapse walls and buildings, or create a subterranean passage directly into the fortress's interior. For example, when Hideyoshi besieged Itami Castle in 1574, he ordered his troops to dig a long tunnel from outside the wall into the innermost bailey. After several weeks of hard and dangerous labor, they broke through near the keep, and the castle
Damn.
soon fell. Unlike in Western sieges, however, there is no evidence of mine warfare in Japan, meaning defenders did not dig countermines or engage in underground battles. Even more spectacular was flooding. The use of water as a weapon is famously associated with the Netherlands, where vast areas were deliberately flooded to repel besieging armies. For example, during the siege of Leiden, the forces of the Dutch Republic
And even
flooded
though it's kind of later, when I think of it, I think of Chiang Kai-shek ordering the flooding of big parts of China to stop the Japanese invasion in World War II. And how that totally didn't work, but killed a massive amount of people, right? That's what I think of flooding in warfare.
half the province of Holland to force the Spanish to retreat. In Japan, however, it was usually the attackers who harnessed water as a strategic tool. A striking example is Toyotomi Hideyoshi's siege of Takamatsu in 1582. Nestled in a swampy area between 2 hills, Takamatsu was considered nearly impregnable. Undeterred, Hideyoshi hired hundreds of workers to construct a massive 3-kilometer dam to gradually raise the water level of the surrounding swamp. When the rainy season arrived, Takamatsu quickly became an isolated island in a vast artificial lake. Hideyoshi again demonstrated the devastating power of water in siege warfare during the sieges of Ota in 1585 and Oshi in 1590. If all else failed, attackers had to resort to the slowest but most reliable tactic: starvation.
Yeah.
Since castles rarely housed large numbers of civilians, defenders could often hold out for months or even years, making it equally likely that the besiegers would run out of supplies first. To
Okay,
avoid this,
good.
besieging armies
that's
often
you.
expanded their siege lines into a network of forts and castles surrounding the besieged town. This allowed them to maintain the siege without having to keep and supply a massive force on the ground. Still, starving a garrison was a slow and uncertain tactic.
Yeah.
Cutting off their water supply proved far more effective. During the siege of Chokochi Castle in 1570, for example, the Rokaku clan managed to destroy the aqueduct that fed the castle's well. Immediately realizing the direness of the situation, the commander of the defenders, Shibata Katsuie, ordered the destruction of all other supplies and led his men in a death-defying final counterattack. Against all odds, the assault succeeded, forcing the Rokaku forces to retreat. From that day on, Shibata was known as
I've heard of this guy.
Shibata,
Yeah.
Devil Shibata. All
Doing
in all,
right.
long sieges were rare in Japan. Between 1512 and 1614, only 29 sieges lasted more than a month. The longest by far was Oda Nobunaga's attack on Ishiyama Hongenji, the main fortress of the Ikko Ikki sect. which dragged on for almost 11 years.
11
The
years
scarcity
siege.
of prolonged engagements reflects a clear preference. Japanese commanders generally avoided drawn-out sieges. Instead,
I don't know what's the longest siege in history. I think in some video about the Venetian Republic, I think I remember about one siege in a tiny island. That was under siege by the Ottoman Empire. Well, I think it was the Ottoman Empire, yeah. I think it was like a 20 or 30 year siege or something, because it was still an island, so I guess to an extent they were still like able to grow food and stuff like that. It wasn't a castle, it was an island, right? Yeah.
they favored swift, decisive assaults. Oda Nobunaga, for example, relied on direct infantry assaults in 70.5% of all his attacks on fortified places. And this was the most common approach among his contemporaries as well. The reasons were both cultural and practical. Samurai doctrine emphasized boldness and valor rather than patient attrition in the trenches. At the same time, logistical realities often demanded speed. Supplying an army deep in enemy territory was difficult. Relief forces could arrive at any moment, and many ashigaru, peasant infantrymen, were farmers who needed to return home in time for the harvest. In short, commanders had every incentive to bring sieges to a swift end. Direct assaults were an effective means to achieve this. Though they typically resulted in heavy casualties, they were highly efficient in terms of time and cost. In addition, they offered
Cost of life is
samurai
nothing
a chance
against the
for
cost of everything else, as always.
glory, almost comparable to that of open field battle. For instance, the first warrior to enter a castle during a siege was referred to as the Ichiban Nori and earned immense prestige. So great was the honor that men literally competed to be the first to charge forward. However, the enthusiasm of the individual fighter and the frequent use of assaults should not obscure their inherent risks. Japanese castles were explicitly designed to resist this kind of frontal attack, which could make
I assume majority of the time the first guy in dies.
them a deadly gamble. When it came to the actual storm attack, the besieger would first identify the most favorable point of assault, often a weak spot in the defenses or a dip in the terrain where archers could provide better cover. Once the direction was set and the troops stood ready, the assault began. The first obstacle the besiegers faced was the moat. As they struggled through the tatami-like network using ladders and large shields, the defenders unleashed a hail of stones, arrows, and arquebus fire. Meanwhile, the attackers as archers and arquebusiers returned fire, aiming to suppress the defenders and ignite the wooden buildings with flaming arrows and small grenades. Once the attackers crossed the moat, they reached the wall of the first bailey and immediately began to climb it. It was usually not very difficult, even without ladders, as the sloped, dry stone walls offered plenty of footholds. However, castle architects anticipated this vulnerability. The keep or corner turrets and even upper wall sections featured openings called ishi otoshi, known as murder holes in European terminology, through which defenders could drop stones directly onto the climbers below. These openings resembled the gun ports of large ships and could be closed with a hatch. At the top of the wall, attackers encountered a row of metal spikes, which they had to climb around, while the defenders pounced them with a brutal but effective weapon known as wolf's teeth. These were massive wooden beams, sometimes studded with iron nails and suspended on ropes or chains, which were repeatedly dropped or swung along the wall, battering the climbers and causing severe injuries or sending them crashing to the ground. Entirely in accordance with their defense-in-depth tactics, the defenders aimed to inflict as many casualties as possible on the attackers at the outermost wall, but did not intend to stop them at all costs. Avoiding direct confrontation once the situation became precarious, they conducted a fighting retreat to the high ground of the second bailey, confronting the intruders with a series of skirmishes and ambushes. This was the genius of these fortresses' design. Sections that fell to the enemy could be isolated easily, allowing for counterattacks from secure positions. The defenders exploited this advantage, while the besiegers struggled to push through the hail of bullets to reach the second wall as quickly as possible. In doing so, they crossed the first threshold and entered a deadly network of defense in depth. One way to shorten this slow, bloody advance was through bribery and blackmail. During the siege of Fushimi Castle in 1600, one of the last decisive battles before the unification under the Tokugawa, their enemies tried to take Fushimi by storm. The attack began on the 27th of August, but soon stalled at the wall of the main bailey. Only when the besiegers took the defenders' family hostage and forced him to set fire to a tower did they break through and capture the castle. If no such opportunity arose, the attackers faced an even tougher climb, as the walls of the second bailey were usually steeper than those of the first. In addition, the defenders took this stage of the retreat battle far more seriously. From above, they jabbed the climbing men with long spears and thrust them through small holes in the walls, aiming for the climbers' unprotected bellies. They inflicted as much damage as they could, while still avoiding direct confrontation. Very much to the frustration of the attackers, who wanted to finally fight them, the defenders retreated again as soon as the first man climbed over the wall. The closer the invaders advanced toward the castle's heart, the fiercer the resistance grew. The second bailey was fortified with additional obstacles and elevated.
It's always interesting, like the duality of samurai tactics, right? Like on one side you have the, it's dishonorable to do anything but just face someone in battle, right? And on the other side you have like the more strategist samurai type like this, where again, the other type would probably look at this as very dishonorable, right? Like not face them directly, but slowly retreat, go behind a wall, stab them from the wall, retreat to the next wall. Like, it's really interesting the different view of the different side, I guess.
Positions, forcing attackers into narrow designated paths. These confined routes split the invading force, rendering their numerical superiority useless. Instead, the defenders now held every advantage. Engaging in a kind of guerrilla warfare, they isolated small groups, struck with lightning speed, then vanished through gates or secret passages, only to reappear and strike elsewhere moments later. Reinforcements often arrived too late, finding nothing but the bodies of their slaughtered comrades. The winding paths.
Man, I don't know if any of you have played Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 and 2. They're incredibly historically accurate medieval game from, the Bohemian War, I guess, around that time, like 1500. And again, they're like such a fun, immersive, game as like, character in that time period, right? I wish there was a game of that quality based on like, I always say it, but like, not just this period of Japan, but, different period of history, right? Like the Three Kingdom era, because there's a lot of Three Kingdom game, but they tend to be Dynasty Warrior, right? But one swing kills hundreds of enemies or something. I wish there was like more games of that quality and that immersiveness and that level of care for the historical accuracy. It's still a game, right? It's not like that real per se, but it's still like so well done. I mean, I'd always be cheating Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 and 2. They're just so freaking incredible. It's such a shame that in that genre, all of the other like historically accurate game tends to be like very small indie, text game or like a strategy game like Total War or something. And Kingdom Come Deliverance kind of stands alone, as like this first person, ultra immersive historical simulator, basically. Yeah.
And courtyards became deadly traps, where attackers were ambushed or hit by precise volleys at any moment. If the attackers survived running the deadly gauntlet through the labyrinthine defenses, they faced the last challenge, the main bailey with the keep. Often seen as the final boss, the keep mimicked the outer defenses, with a maze of narrow hallways, loopholes, complex floor plans, and murder holes. Yet, in practical terms, it held limited military value. By the time the attackers reached the inner bailey, they rarely needed to capture the keep. It was much easier to set it ablaze, and in many cases, the defenders surrendered anyway, once the main bailey fell.
I see.
This was often their best hope of survival. Those who resisted too long risked harsh retribution. Still, some commanders, unwilling to yield castle and honor, led one final, desperate counterattack in defiance. Victory was unlikely and defeat certain.
Now that's the samurai way.
Honor was worth the cost.
Okay.
Don't forget to check out Tacticus. Build your squad.
That's it. Man, interesting. I actually never thought about it, but yeah, Japanese castles were very different. So, again, I almost feel like, I don't know if, it is a castle, but, my idea of castle is the Western castle, so it really feels like so unlike a castle, even though it is a castle. Yeah, I like the system though, the design. It's pretty interesting. I'm sure there's some Western castle who had like a bit of a system of like multiple line of retreat and bailies, as you call it, but it was definitely nothing like this. Yeah, really interesting. Again, my dream is like a Sengoku period game where, you know, with like actually realistic, yeah, like an immersive realistic game of that time period, right? As fun as something like Ghost of Tsushima is, you know, you can clear castles as a lone man, right? And it's not really it. Yeah, good stuff. I learned quite a bit from this. Yeah, I learned quite a bit. Very interesting video. Okay. I now understand why Takeshi's castle was structured as it was, yeah. Fair enough. Good one. Alright, that's a very nice video. Next, we have 5 reasons why Japanese people shouldn't come to the Philippines. Okay, I think we had watched a video from this channel before, which was like 5 reasons, well, 5 things Japanese people should do in the Philippines, I think it was, by when to treat Japan.
It's me, Sam Japan. It's Mana. Today's video is not usual video because I'm so angry.
Whoa.
I went to the Philippines
Why is she angry?
over 6 times. I got so many experience, but after I go back to Japan, I feel like I should not go back to the Philippines anymore.
Reminds me, recently I saw a stat on Reddit, which was kind of crazy. I forgot the exact numbers, but it was about how like a majority of Japanese basically say that they have no interest in ever leaving the country, to even like go visit another country. And there was also like another stat of like even crazier, where like it was still a majority of people have not even an interest of leaving their current prefecture or their city, basically. Just no interest in traveling.
Every time I go to the Philippines, I feel like so many feelings. So today I'm gonna talk
Understandable.
about 5 reasons Japanese people you should not come to the Philippines. Let's go! Before I watch this video, please subscribe our channel and follow my Instagram, Manaharo! Let's go! Number 1, your personality will be changed because Japanese person is very shy. Me too. When we do something, we focus on it and we don't care about other people, right? We only focus on like school, job. Sometimes we don't care about other people. When we do something, we
Understandable,
do
though.
it so seriously. We don't talk about so much, right? But in the Philippines, it's totally different. The staff is so cheerful, like, oh, how are you? What's your name? Where are you from? Filipino people is very cheerful and so.
I kind of feel like that's probably like the same for like most countries, right? I mean, you know, Japan is very like ultra polite, and I'm not saying other countries aren't polite, but you know, I think most of the countries aren't on that level, right? Yeah.
Friendly. I was so surprised. Every time I go to the Philippines, I do like, hello, how are you? Have a great day. I feel like my personality is changed. When you come back to Japan from the Philippines, friends and family will be surprised because your personality is more cheerful and friendly.
That's why you have to have different personality between language.
So be careful. Also, my mom is very surprised because every time I go back to Japan, she says, your personality is changed. I'm so cheerful person. That is the one of the reasons you should not come to the Philippines. Number
Okay, I thought she was gonna talk about like serious bad stuff, but it's that kind of reasoning, huh?
2, you cannot stand for the Japanese weather. In Japan, we have 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, winter. Except except summer, Japanese weather is so cold. Sometimes you can see the snowing. When we go to outside, we wear so many clothes, especially winter. But in the Philippines, it's so hot weather all year, even Christmas Day too. When I went to the Philippines on Christmas Day, I had so many clothes from Japan, like heavy cut. I did not use it because it's so hot. I sweat a lot. You should bring like t-shirts, no sleeve, and you should bring towels too because you will sweat so much. Every time I go back to Japan, I feel like more cold. So I think it's little bit. I cannot stand for the Japanese weather. So be careful. I really like summer season. When I in the Philippines, I feel summer season all day. I don't like cold weather so much. So when I go back to Japan, I feel like I don't wanna go back to Japan. One time.
Fair enough, but at the same time, again, personally, I can't imagine living in a country that's like, you know, always hot or always cold. I kind of like the variety. I can't imagine like being sweaty all year round, right? I feel like, you know, I guess if you were born there, you're used to it, right? But man, if you're moving to a country that's like only one type of weather most of the time, yeah, I don't know if I could deal with it.
You got the Philippines weather, you cannot go back to Japan if you really like summer season. This is second reason you should not come to the Philippines. Number 3, you can get weight easily. In the Philippines, there are so many delicious food. We don't have Jollibees in Japan, but you can find so many Jollibees in the Philippines. Its cost so reasonable. It's so addictive. Also, we don't have night market except festival, right? Filipino food is sweeter than Japanese food. Japanese food is not so strong flavor, but the Filipino food is little bit strong.
Said the country of NATO.
Flavor for Japanese. So if you really like Filipino style and Western style, you can get weight easily.
But I don't care.
In the Philippines, there are so many kind of food, like Filipino food, Western food, Japanese, Korean. Every time I go to the Philippines, I really enjoy eating. I cannot stop eating. It's so fun, but it's so dangerous. Be careful, Japanese people. So many Japanese people really like mango, papaya, bananas, but especially mango. It's expensive food in Japan. In the Philippines, you can buy mangoes cheaper than Japan. Have you watched my previous video which I went to Baguio market? That time I bought 3 mangoes. It's cost so reasonable.
I don't know if I've ever had mangoes.
It's sad reasons you should not come to the Philippines. Number 4.
Well, I won't
you
come.
cannot go back to Japan. In Japan, everything is so expensive. When we go to restaurant for lunch, one meal is over 1,000 yen. Even you go to...
I see where she's going with this, but it's the classic thing, right? Like, you know, if you have a country with a strong economy and you go to like a lesser economy country, suddenly you're like, you might go from like stable to middle income or whatever, right? Because yeah, the prices are very different. But then it's not actually that, you know, things are cheap, because if you're someone from the country making money from the country, it's probably not cheap, right? Yeah, it just makes sense. Yeah.
McDonald's, it's cost over 500 yen. But in the Philippines, if you have 500 yen, you can buy 3 meals at Jollibee. Jollibee is so reasonable price. One meal is 100 peso, and transportation is expensive, rent fee, everything is expensive in Japan. Usually in Japan, I save money a lot. But in the Philippines, everything is reasonable price. That's why you cannot go back to Japan.
But again, it's reasonable for a foreigner who comes from a country that, has stronger money, right? That's really just how it works.
Every time I go back to Japan, I feel like it's so expensive. If I pay this one, I can get 10 Jollibee's menu.
She loves her
It was
Jollibees.
my previous video, which is 1,000 peso challenge at the night market and mall. That was so hard to spend 1,000 peso because everything is reasonable. When I spent 1,000 peso at the night market, I bought so many food and I feel so satisfied. When I spent 1,000 peso at the mall, I bought so many souvenirs you can really enjoy within 1,000 peso. I know it's expensive money, but if you bought that amount of things, it's cost double or third prices in Japan. Number 5, that is last one. You have too much fun in the Philippines. You feel don't wanna
I guess I don't want to have fun, so I should definitely not go to the Philippines.
go back to Japan because people are nice, food are nice, weather is nice, everything is reasonable price, everything is good for you. You feel like you don't wanna go back to Japan. I'm sure. Every time I go to the Philippines, I feel like I love Philippines more and more. First time I went to Baguio for language school, I feel like Philippines is so nice country and I got so much fun. And then I went to Manila, I feel like Manila is so nice too. And the third time, I wanna eat more Filipino food.
It's all about the food.
Beautiful place in the Philippines. I got sweetheart from Filipino. I'm a foreigner in the Philippines, but Filipino is so kind for me too. So I feel like, I wanna stay here. So it's so dangerous. I think Japanese people love Philippines too. Be careful, it's so addictive country. I have never been to Cebu. There are more places
Cebu.
I have never been to. So I think I will get more fun in the Philippines. I'm so scary.
Don't be afraid.
Japanese people really like rice. There are so many rice menus. You can
I ate
enjoy
rice today.
eating too. It's not far away from Japan to the Philippines. So you feel like I wanna go back to the Philippines again. That is 5 reasons you should not come to the Philippines because it's so addictive and you got so much fun in the Philippines.
The clickbait, I got baited.
That is my 5 reasons Japanese you should.
I thought this would be like negative stuff or something. Okay, I'll pause here. Yeah, I mean, it's cute, obviously. Like our reason not to come is all positive, I guess. What can I say? I feel like a lot of people feel like that about country they visit as a foreigner, right? As a tourist, it always seems like so many things are better than your own country for different reasons, right? I think that's the meme that you see all the time online about people traveling to Japan, for example, right? Or people going to Japan saying it's so great, but it's how you feel as a tourist, right? Yeah, it's the classic. Nice video. I wonder if she's still doing that. This is from 6 years ago. I wonder if she's still doing that. Let's see her channel. Oh yeah, no, she stopped posting. But her last video 1 year ago was why Japanese girls are falling in love with the Philippines. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, she stopped posting, so that's kind of sad. I always find it sad, like, looking at a channel like this and seeing that they just stopped, It happens all the time with small reaction channels that I check out sometime, like last post 2 years ago. Yeah. Okay, nice video, all I can say. Next we have when Grieg met Liszt, then challenged him to a sight read his Piano Concerto by Piano Curio. Okay, interesting. account directly from Edward Grieg's written recollection and eyewitness description of Liszt's residence in Rome. Weimar, Germany.
Monsieur, it is with the greatest pleasure that I express to you the sincere joy that I felt upon reading through your sonata, Opus 8. The sonata bears witness to a great talent for composition and shows a well-conceived, inventive, and excellent treatment of the material. If you should come to Germany this winter, I cordially invite you to make a visit to Weimar so that we could meet.
Very
Would
nice.
you believe that I've recently got a letter from Franz Liszt? Really? It almost made me dizzy. Just think, he invites me to visit him.
Wow.
In the winter of 1870, Edvard Grieg traveled abroad to finally make his first acquaintance with Franz Liszt, the world's most famous living pianist, who had by then
Nice that they
moved
speak
from
German.
Weimar to his secondary residence in the Santa Francesca Romana, a monastery in the heart of the Eternal City. As Grieg approached the entrance to Liszt's quarters, he would have noted all the familiar Roman landmarks, the Forum to his right, the Colosseum on his left,
Wow.
and straight ahead, the Arch of Titus. He pulled down on a green cord that alerted two servants, who opened the door and led him into the elegantly furnished drawing room, previously inhabited by a cardinal but now the seasonal home of musical royalty. The legendary pianist emerged, wearing the long black coat of a clergyman. Smiling amiably at his Norwegian visitor, he addressed him in German. "We've exchanged a few letters, haven't we?" Liszt said. "That is why I am here," replied Grieg. As they talked, Liszt voraciously eyed the parcel of music under Grieg's arm. Taking the hint, Grieg promptly emptied its contents, placing the score of his second violin sonata upon the music rack of a nearby piano. It was an American Chickering recently donated to Liszt as part of an international publicity stunt, one intended to show up Chickering's
Chickering.
national rival Steinway & Sons.
Oh,
The
Steinway was already on.
confines of the monastery had not been kind to the piano's action over the previous 2 years. Liszt's students often complained of its uneven touch and frequently stuck black keys, but Liszt never seemed to be bothered by these defects. Under his fingers, the instrument always sounded as heavenly as the building that housed it.
Of course.
Also present were Liszt's regular masterclass students, including the Italian Giovanni Sagambati, who probably looked on with curiosity at the 5-foot-tall
He's some
Norwegian
kind of
newcomer.
troll.
What sort of exotic elements might his music contain? Picking up the Opus 13 violin sonata, Liszt's spidery fingers rapidly leafed through its pages as he muttered almost to himself a sort of running commentary on various passages. "Bravo, sehr schön," he said, while nodding his head in agreement with the most impressive parts. Grieg's spirits rose until he heard what Liszt said next. "Would you like to play it?" His
Nani.
throat dropped. His mood shattered. Why hadn't he thought to practice the sonata
Oh.
beforehand? He
I was gonna say it's the same where like someone composed an awesome song, but they're good at composing and not at actually performing.
was sure to make a mess
no.
of it in front of such a great pianist and his most talented students without
no.
any preparation whatsoever. But then again, he thought, it was better to stumble through it than admit defeat and have to
Just
turn pages
do it.
while the master did all the work. So Grieg gathered his courage, seated himself before the ornate American grand, and began to play. At the start, the violin breaks out with a somewhat Baroque but Norwegian-sounding passage.
Ominous.
"My, how dashing," Liszt exclaimed. "I like that. Play it once more." When the violin enters again in the next section, Liszt played the part himself, an octave higher on the piano, with such a beautiful expression in pure cantabile that Grieg could only smile to himself. Then they dove into the allegro at breakneck speed.
That's fun.
After completing the movement, Grieg asked to play something for piano alone, choosing the minuet from his humoresques. After playing the first 8 bars and repeating them, Liszt burst in and began singing the melody in a heroic tone. Evidently,
Okay.
it was the national element in Grieg's music that most appealed to him. Several weeks passed before Grieg returned once more to Liszt's residence, this time bringing with him his most ambitious composition to date, the Piano Concerto in A minor. Though its premiere had taken place a year earlier in Copenhagen, the score was not yet in print, and Liszt had no way of knowing what special challenges it contained. Upon seeing the
Interesting.
score and rifling through its contents, Liszt once again asked the question, "Would you like to play it?" This time, Grieg was adamant. He could not. In fact, he wasn't sure that anybody could read the extremely difficult
Winding and I were eager to see whether he would really sight read my concerto. I personally considered it impossible, Grieg writing to his parents.
part at sight. But Liszt was of a different opinion. He snatched the manuscript,
Just try
went
me.
over to the piano, and with a peculiar smile said to all those present, "Well, now I'll show you that I can't play it either." Then he began.
Oh, that sounds familiar. Maybe.
He played the first part so rapidly that Grieg thought it sounded rather careless, but once he corrected the master's tempo, the result was nothing less than sublime. He breezed through the animato section with its athletic skips, reminiscent of the Norwegian Halling dance. He squeezed every last drop of lyricism from the second theme.
Very gentle. Quite like that.
And most incredibly of all, he played the entire cadenza, the most formidable moment in the whole work, all with the utmost expression.
Wow.
But Liszt didn't just play the notes. He conversed as he did so, carrying on a brilliant conversation with everyone in the audience, distributing nods left and right, mainly when he was especially pleased with something. As Liszt approached the climax of the whole concerto, Grieg witnessed an unforgettably divine episode. In the last measures, amid a shower of fortissimo triplets, the G-sharp leading tone of the key is flattened to a G natural, lending an exotic, mixolydian flavor to the final cadence.
I have no idea what any of this means, but it sounds great.
Upon reaching this unusual feature, Liszt suddenly rose from the bench, strode dramatically around the room, and roared the theme aloud. G, G, not G sharp. Yes, fantastic. That's the real Swedish element Apparently,
Okay.
Liszt had forgotten that Grieg was a Norwegian, not a Swede, but the composer probably didn't mind. Liszt then went back to the piano, repeated the whole phrase, and concluded it. Handing back the score to Grieg, Liszt told him, "Hold to your course. You have the talent for it, and don't get scared off." Grieg later called this his
Cool.
sacred mandate, remembering it often during times of bitterness and discouragement. He had won the approval of the world.
This advice is of infinite importance to me, a sacred mandate. When disappointment and bitterness come, I shall think of his word. This hour will have a wonderful power to sustain me in days of adversity. That is my confident hope. That's amazing.
Grieg's most legendary pianist.
I wish someone would say something that's motivating to me. That I could remember in difficult time. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I mean, second video we watch, talking about this Liszt guy, and obviously I'm sure people in the music know how legendary he is, and I didn't until now, definitely, until now in the last video, right? He is definitely something, that was cool, just an absolute master at work, impressed by the student. I mean, it's easy to enjoy a story like that, right? It's really easy to imagine how he wasn't really a student, but the musician might have felt, Grieg. Yeah, that was cool. As always, I can't really say I understand much of, the logic of the composition and all the explanation of the different minute details and everything, but, you don't really need that to enjoy the music and the incredible composition itself. So, yeah, that was really cool. Really cool. Liszt really sounds like an aura farmer, is the best way I can put it. An aura farmer, yeah. Great video. Okay. Next, what do we watch? And again, if you guys have any videos, don't hesitate to share them. How about this one? I was interested, I wanted to watch it. Where is Mamiya, Takako, City Pop Biggest Mystery by the great Aniki.
Mamiya Takako's 1982 album Love Trip is a Japanese city pop classic. Period. Or at least that's what the city pop loving quarter of the internet will tell you. Now, whether you agree with that lofty title or not, one thing is hard to deny. This album is kinda smooth.
I should listen to
tracks, just over 42 minutes, and not a single wasted second. From the very first notes, Love Trip pulls you into a hazy, late-night world of silky grooves, wistful melodies, and that unmistakable kind of 80s melancholy that somehow feels both distant and deeply personal.
I love the album
This is
cover.
night drive music, the kind you play while staring out at neon-lit highways, pretending you're cruising through 1980s Tokyo, reminiscing about memories that never actually happened.
I love
But
that.
hey, that's city pop, isn't it? Naturally, an album this good, it also leaves you with one feeling. You want more. That's where the story of this album takes a strange little turn, because Love Trip wasn't just Mamiya Takako's debut album, it was her only album, simultaneously her hello and goodbye to the Japanese music industry.
Okay.
No follow-up, no sophomore release, no long, glittering career in Japan's booming 80s music.
I mean, if it's a 20-minute video, so I'm sure there's more to it, but my first thought would be simply that, it wasn't that popular at the time. In the same way that, I don't think it was doing bad, but Plastic Love wasn't that big at the time. And it's only 40 years later on YouTube that it became, this massive, and Maria Takeuchi's name became massive, right? I'm sure there was a lot like that, right? Where incredible music record, but when it released, no one really cared, and it's only later that it gains popularity, but by then the artist has already moved on from the industry.
Scene. Just one impeccably produced record, made with the help of some serious industry heavy hitters, and then complete silence, despite its musical quality, despite the talent behind it, despite accumulating millions upon millions of views on YouTube decades later and gathering an international cult following that few, if any, city pop albums can match. Mamiya Takako seems to have vanished off the face of the earth, almost as quickly as she appeared. So, how does one drop a classic album and then just disappear? Who is Mamiya Takako? And perhaps the bigger question, where is she? Let's rewind to early 1980s Japan to piece together Mamiya Takako's little-known career in music before Love Trip, her sudden disappearance after Love Trip, and maybe, just maybe, unravel city pop's biggest mystery along the way. Ikimashou. Let's do
Definitely
this.
should listen to this album to get more context.
Alright, so before we try to figure out what happened after the release of Mamiya's debut album, we should probably talk about what happened before it. And honestly, that's easier said than done. There's no biography, no official interviews, not even a proper Wikipedia page for Mamiya as a person. Not in English, not even in Japanese.
Really?
There's a Korean one, which I think speaks for itself. But the point stands, solid information about Mamiya Takako is painfully hard to come by. Thankfully, I'm far from the first person on the internet to become mildly obsessed with this woman and her music. Thanks to some extremely dedicated online sleuths who clearly have way more patience than I do, we're able to piece together at least fragments of Mamiya's life before a love trip. And by fragments, I really do mean fragments. We don't even have a confirmed birth date. The best estimate,
Wow,
she was
that
likely
much.
born sometime during the 1950s, a detail we can roughly infer from the very first official release she ever appeared on. Because despite Love Trip becoming her only album, it wasn't her first appearance in music.
Yeah.
4 years before her debut album hit store shelves, Mamiya made her professional debut as part of a short-lived, jazz-inspired vocal trio called POW, alongside TV personality and model Sabine Kaneko, as well as composer Miura Yoshikazu. In the liner notes of their debut 1978 single, wonderfully titled Yes, Say Yes, Please Say Yes, which
Okay.
kinda sounds like me begging you to sub to my Patreon in every damn video, we actually get some very rare, concrete details about Mamiya's early life.
Oh.
In the liner notes, she is described as having been the lead vocalist of several amateur groups during her high school and university days. So, by the late 1970s...
You know, it's such a good showcase of like how fast things have moved. Yesterday I was talking to my mom about like, she was talking to me about like some like early computer thing that we had in France called Minitel, which was like, it's not really a computer, but it kind of was like this. And then I was talking to her about like the pager and stuff like that. And you know, how fast everything moved from like the 80s to now, right? Well, like these days, you know, anyone starting their music career, like it's kind of like the opposite, right? It would be almost impossible not to find all of the information because they would have posted about it online and there will be so much to find from like their online trail. But back then, the 80s and maybe a little bit of the 90s, before the internet really became a thing, yeah, I mean, you know, there's really not like that much of a way to dig into like this smaller artists. But these days, like even the smaller artists, you know, if you really dig, you can find a lot of stuff on different websites and everything, and really put them all together like biography, I guess. But yeah, back then it's really like, you know, people can have a lot more privacy, I guess.
She was likely in her mid-20s, university student, perhaps even graduate, musically somewhat experienced, and trying to break into the industry. And POW was to be her first step towards that goal. On their debut 1978 single, Mamiya served as a background vocalist. You can faintly hear her come in around the 51-second mark.
Same old, it's the same old story.
Beyond that, she also appears on the B-side, titled Stay Close to Me. These are hardly standout performances by any stretch of the imagination, and yet it matters. These recordings are the only known examples of her voice outside of Love Trip, which, you know, is kind of significant in the context of this entire story.
Yeah.
Regardless, POW was not meant to be her big break. By the time the trio released their debut album in 1980, Mamiya had already been replaced by a certain Miyazaki Fumiko. Just like that, she was out, leaving her to pursue music on her own. It is believed that after Powell, Mamiya took on contract work. You know, commercial modeling, voice acting gigs, smaller industry jobs. Fortunately,
Fair
none
enough.
of that material appears to have survived publicly. No footage, no audio, nothing easily accessible.
I mean, I'm sure there is, but it's the singer probably she used different name, right? Like, it's pretty common, yeah. So if she used different name, it's not that easy to track down.
She's basically a phantom. Or at least until 1982, that is. That year, the music division of Japanese production company Kitty was looking to expand its roster. According to later accounts, it was one of their musicians who discovered Mamiya performing at a club in Shinjuku, Tokyo. Just like that, she landed herself a shiny new record deal.
Nice.
Production on her debut album began soon after in April 1982 at KRS Recording Studio in Tokyo. If you're judging by the talent involved here, she was really being set up for something big. The album's main producer was the experienced Sawai Genji, leader of the fusion band Bacon Egg.
Okay.
Further contributions also came from Hoshikatsu of 60s rock band The Mobs, and then there was Miura Yoshiko, known for writing songs for major anime series like Cat's Eye and Fist of the North Star,
Oh.
but also for artists like Ohashi Tsunko and Anri.
Anri.
The album art had pedigree. It was created by Tachima Teruhisa, who later worked on projects like Pad Labor the Movie and
Ah.
Ghost in the Shell.
That's why it
In
looks
other
so good.
words, serious industry muscle. After roughly 4.5 months, the team wrapped production on Love Trip in late August 1982, and a release date was set for later that year. And so on November 25th, 1982, Love Trip hit store shelves across Japan, and it landed with a loud, resounding thud. The album
Figure.
flopped.
Figure.
And I don't say that because we have devastating sales numbers or chart positions to point to. I say it because we don't. There are
Yeah.
no recorded chart positions from its release on the Oricon charts, Japan's equivalent of Billboard. No notable rankings, no documented commercial impact whatsoever. It was as if the album barely registered at all. The question is, why? Big names were involved, the music was great, the packaging was sleek.
No marketing,
So
maybe?
what went wrong here? Well, for one, there was the competition. Late 1982 wasn't exactly a quiet moment in Japanese pop. Around the same time Love Trip was released, artists like Nakamori Akina were dominating headlines, with the lead single from her third album making some serious waves. Matsuda Seiko had just dropped her album Candy. In other words, the release window was stacked as is. Releasing the debut album of a completely unknown artist in the middle of all that, bold, risky, possibly a bit stupid.
I guess, yeah.
Then there was the promotion. Or the lack thereof.
That's what I thought.
Indie Records was already a relatively small label compared to giants like CBS Sony, but even by their own standards, Love Trip barely got a push. In the early 80s, radio was everything. If your song wasn't playing in homes and car stereos across Japan, it might as well not exist, basically. Mamiya and her album simply never really got that kind of exposure. The only notable promotion the album allegedly received was the track Midnight Joke being spun in a few clubs in Tokyo, which earned her a tiny, dedicated following that stopped the album from completely falling into obscurity, but nowhere near mainstream recognition.
That's definitely not
So,
enough, yeah.
1982 came to a close. Still, almost no one knew who Mamiya Takako was. That, as you already know, is where her solo career began and ended.
It is really sad though, like seriously. I haven't listened to it, but from everything said, yeah, it's probably like an incredible album, right? And, you know, knowing her story, right, she probably spent years trying to get a chance, and she finally gets a chance, and actually makes something good, and yet, you know, there's no marketing, no promotion, so it's like doomed to fail, right? It's probably so disappointing. So yeah, I'm guessing the story is that she just quit after that, you know, that would definitely just kill you mentally.
Which brings us to the core question of this entire video. What did Mamiya Takako do after Love Trip? And
Let's
why
see if I'm
did she
right.
never release another album? The why, at least on the surface, seems painfully simple. She got her shot, it didn't work out, she moved on. After being replaced in Pao, who, to be fair, didn't exactly light up the industry either, and then watching her first solo album quietly disappear into obscurity, it's not hard to imagine she felt kind of discouraged. She was still in her 20s, she had options, a whole life ahead of her. Seemingly, she chose a different path. What kind of path exactly? Well, that's where things get murky. Here's the thing. For several decades, almost nobody even cared enough to ask.
Right, I mean, it's probably like later Internet Detective that started tracking her, yeah?
Look, I said it at the beginning, and I'll say it again. Love Trip is a classic. But I'm also willing to bet that what I just said probably wasn't said that often until less than 10 years ago. It wasn't until the late 2010s that the genre of Japanese city pop experienced that totally unexpected online renaissance, when a YouTube algorithm did whatever it is that the algorithm does, with millions of people suddenly listening to Mamiya Takeuchi's Plastic Love. From there, the floodgates opened. Songs that had been mildly...
Man, we're all going to be so fucking nostalgic of, you know... I mean, 10 years ago, like, YouTube was also like... It already had a lot of bullshit, right? But, you know, it did something so right with, like, making city pop popular again like this, right? And these days, half of my recommendation are, like, shitty AI playlist videos of music and stuff like that. And, you know, I wish it would do something like this again, like bring back some unknown specific country music style, you know, that's awesome. I wish YouTube would do this again, you know. I wish the algorithm wasn't utterly trashed these days.
Successful or completely ignored in Japan of the 1980s suddenly exploded in popularity worldwide. Vinyl reissues selling out, comment sections filled up with listeners from around the world with praises and...
And so I say, yeah, like, thanks to that whole thing, I became a fan of Mamiya Takeuchi, Taeko Nuki, and then I discovered Doji Morita and one of my absolute favorite artists, Ako Yamasaki. You know, which again, even she was very obscure, right? I mean, music from the 70s to now, and, you know, she still didn't get as big as, like, Mamiya Takeuchi, for example, but man, so much good stuff, yeah.
Fake 1980s Tokyo ramen shop stories. But while many of these now suddenly internationally famous artists from that era actually had established careers in Japan, easily accessible biographies, or were even still active and able to embrace their new global audience, Mamiya Takako had none of that. On top of that, artists like Mamiya Takeuchi had individual songs that won the algorithm lottery. But Mamiya, she didn't have just one viral track, she had an entire album rediscovered almost overnight. Her fanbase grew much bigger than it had ever been in 1982 when the album actually came out. And yet, searching her name online brought up almost nothing beyond Love Trip. No detailed biography, no additional interviews, no other albums, no clear trace of where she went. Just an incredibly smooth, soothing voice, which was completely frozen in time. Naturally, people got curious. Who is she? Where is she now? And why did she disappear? As we've just explored, bits and pieces of her early career slowly resurfaced, but her life after Love Trip remained a black hole. So her music, her striking appearance on that now iconic album cover, her complete absence from public life, all of it became wrapped up in one single word: mystery. Mamiya Takako wasn't just one of many rediscovered city pop artists anymore, she had become city pop's biggest mystery.
Okay, so what's the answer?
Where did this woman actually
Man, does he like repeating
even a real answer to that
the same
question?
thing? I love this channel, but, you know, obviously, like, I'm a reaction channel, so I don't have much to say as far as, like, writing scripts, but I feel like Aniki is great in, for example, like, the 80s video where, like, you know, he goes from topic to topic very fast, but in single individual topic like this, he does have a bad habit of padding a lot and kind of repeating, I guess.
Well, kind of.
As much as I like his videos.
Maybe. But the dominant theme of Mamiya Takako's life after Love Trip is speculation. Internet speculation.
Wait, so no one found out?
Threads, archive deep dives, people trying to track down even the smallest clue about what happened to her. One of the most thorough write-ups I was able to find comes from Reddit user Rocket_Brown, whose deep dive into Mamiya's career was an invaluable source for this video.
It's always a Redditor or a 4chaner who's, you know, writing some big write-up like this, an investigation. Hello, Sap. Hello. What's up?
The essay avoids going too far into wild theories about her current whereabouts, but it does mention a few interesting possibilities. One claim is that after Love Trip, Mamiya simply returned to contract work. Again, commercials, small media gigs, the kind of industry jobs she allegedly did after leaving POW.
We should find her name if she did.
Simply because, well, that would have been fairly normal for a young artist in early 80s Japan. Like, that's what they usually did between albums anyway, successful or not. Then there's even an alleged memory of a TV commercial featuring Mamiya in a bikini advertising a coffee vending machine. Which honestly sounds legit simply due to the fact that it seems exactly like something 1980s Japan would produce.
Of course.
Yet again, there's no surviving evidence of that commercial whatsoever. No footage, no documentation, nothing. If it did exist, it may now be lost media. So if you're into that sort of hunt, well, you've got your mission. Your big chance to enter the Internet Hall of Fame, I guess. Still, contract work isn't exactly a lifelong career path, and if she truly left the entertainment world behind, then tracking her down becomes exponentially harder. Like, an office lady with no agency, no stage name, no public presence. Now that's nearly impossible to track down more than 40 years later, which actually raises another question. Do we even know her real name?
That's what I was about to say. Like, how do you, like, there's so little info, how do you know this is her actual name and not a performer name? Yeah.
Mamiya Takako, that could very well have been a stage name, one she abandoned.
I mean, at the same time, this is probably, you know, like, some of the people who worked on her album are probably still alive, and you can potentially find them and contact them, right? And then ask them if they know anything.
The moment she stepped away
That's
from
what
music.
I would do.
If that's the case, any paper trail might effectively disappear with it, unless someone asked the people who worked with her. And allegedly, that is exactly what happened. In 2020, Korean YouTuber Min Ken released a video about Love Trip, reviewing the album, and claiming to have obtained new information on Mamiya's whereabouts from arranger and guitarist Shina Kazuo, who had worked on 3 tracks on Love Trip. According to Min Ken, he contacted Shina directly and received a simple answer. Mamiya Takako is alive and well. As for what happened after Love Trip, well, she reportedly got married and chose to leave the music industry entirely. And that was it.
It's that
No
simple.
secret second career under an alias, no tragic spiral
makes sense.
after commercial
It makes
failure.
sense.
Thankfully, no early death. Just a normal life. It's the kind of update I think we all wanted to hear. The version where the artist may not have become a superstar, but still found happiness beyond the spotlight. And I'll be honest, I really want to believe that, but as much as I admire Minken's passion and as comforting as that explanation sounds, the claim is simply very difficult to independently verify.
Sure.
There's no public statement, no documented interview, just one second-hand report from a fellow YouTuber. And with Shina Kazuo having just recently passed away, confirming this story has just become a lot harder. So, where does that
But again, I'm sure there's other people who've worked on her album that are still around. If you really wanted to know, I'm sure you could contact some of them and someone would know.
leave us? Despite the speculation and the pieces that do seem to fit neatly together, Mamiya Takako's life after 1982
Like, I'm surprised Aniki himself hasn't contacted anyone. Like, the channel is showed at like 2,000 subs, right? Well, he has almost 100,000, so I feel like he has potentially the clout to get someone to answer, you know?
remains largely unknown. And here's where I'll come in with perhaps a bit of a slightly controversial take. A lot of people seem to hope she'll come out of hiding one day, embrace her rediscovered fame, give interviews, tell us what really happened. And part of me wants that too, otherwise I wouldn't have made this entire video. But another part of me thinks, maybe it's okay if she doesn't.
One part of me thinks if I was her, you know, maybe I'd rather like not know that suddenly my music is popular after all this time. You know what I mean? Like, I'm now in my 50s, 60s, maybe 70s, right? It's been 40 years. And my dream died back then, and now so long later, like finally my music is being appreciated. But you know, I gave up my dream 40 years ago, and now it's too late for me to really, you know, like continue the dream or something, you know what I mean? So I think if I was her, I'd rather not know. I don't know. Maybe she could be the kind of person that looks at it more positively, you know, like, I'm glad that at least people finally appreciate the music, but yeah, I don't know.
There's something strangely fitting about this entire mystery. That calm, soothing voice that appeared in 1982, delivered one immaculate album, and then faded away like a ghost, drifting through a warm summer night in 1980s Japan. In my head, Mamiya Takako was someone who gave music her best shot, and when it didn't work out, she had the confidence to walk away and build a different life. And maybe that's not a tragedy or something, maybe it's just, you know, human. In the end, instead of focusing on what she didn't give us...
To be honest, in the end, we really don't know. Like, one YouTuber said, some guy said that she's fine and all that, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like in the end, the mystery is still there. Like, this video doesn't in the end really feel like it confirms things enough, you know what I mean? Yeah. Which maybe that's what's interesting, I mean, leaving the mystery open.
More albums, more interviews, more answers. Maybe we should just be grateful for what she did leave behind. One absolutely timeless record, one perfect late-night driving soundtrack,
I will
and one
listen to it.
mystery that somehow only makes Love Trip feel that much more special than it already is.
Fair enough.
What a lovely trip into the world of city pop that was. A love trip.
That is the end. Okay, well, fair enough. Like, sometimes mysteries are literally like this, right? There isn't any massive, crazy revelation. That's interesting though, and I should definitely listen to our album, yeah. I'll open it on my other YouTube. Like, I'm actually like still very behind on sleep up, like, around the time where it became big, again, I listened to quite a bit of it and became a big fan of Maya Takeuchi, Taiko Onuki, you know, Akoya Masaki, but that was about it. I didn't really dive too deep into it. And since then, I've always wanted to, but I just haven't done it. You know, it's like on the back burner of like diving even more into classic city pop. So I should do that eventually, yeah. Good video. Here's the link. Okay, but again, this kind of story must be, like, there must be a lot of them, right? Especially in the days before the internet. Ton of artists would just disappear and that's it. No idea what happened to them. It's probably a classic, probably a classic. The name, that time when the underpowered lower category cars actually got quicker than the top category. And one of the saddest story of film project. Okay. Just leave her alone and have her privacy for all artists in general, yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I think it's fine to want to know what she thinks that her music is finally popular, you know. I guess she doesn't need to tell her life story and all that, yeah. But, you know, like, I guess you kind of want to see someone after so long finally, you know, getting their music appreciated and them maybe being happy about it, if that's the case, yeah. You know what, let's watch this one. I'm interested in this weird design. Looks like a rocket. Even more than like normal Formula 1 car. The Motorsport revolution that never was, the Deltawing project by Project Dream.
Motorsport is an always changing world. Whenever it's time to develop a new racing car, there's always someone who thinks outside the box and crafts something completely different from their opponents. Sometimes these cars are more of a mistake rather than being revolutionary. Sometimes they underperform or simply never get to race. But there have been a few times when these cars became icons, an example of how far we can go with our creativity and brilliance. That's where the magic happens. This is the case of the Deltawing, arguably the most ambitious racing car design of the 21st century.
Wow.
A car that not only captured the heart of the community for its
Second
unusual
bobsleigh, yeah.
triangular design, but it showed how it is possible to achieve speed, matching the average LMP2 racing pace, even with unconventional approaches nobody dares to take. Half the weight, half the fuel, half the power, half the drag, all of the speed.
Probably 10 times the danger though.
This is the story of the
Always
Deltawing
looks so good.
project. Back in the 2000s, we were living an era of changes in motorsport. Formula One was turning to the modern design of the early 2010s. WEC was starting to shape the iconic LMP1 cars of the Audi era, and IndyCar was looking forward to a new chassis for their new generation of cars. This last point is crucial, as many designers and manufacturers consider this as an opportunity to submit their cars to the IndyCar Association. One of
It
them
didn't work
was
out,
Ben
huh?
Bowlby. He was more than a simple racing car designer. Many described him as a genius, a lateral thinker, a brilliant innovator thanks to his vision of engineering, and a leader for the entire team he worked with.
Okay.
That's when the Deltawing project officially started. His main idea was to propose his car to the IndyCar Association
Man, it looks
in the
cool.
hope to see it as the new generation model for the series. The car didn't catch the eye so well because of its unpleasant look, but despite that,
Unpleasant look. It looks like a cool rocket, I don't know. It's very futuristic, yeah. Like something in the anime Red Line.
on an engineering level, it was a literal work of a genius. The prominent aspect of the car is surely its triangular design, but is there a particular reason for this choice? Aerodynamics.
Yeah.
The perk of the Deltawing was
Yeah,
its
resistance.
coefficient of drag, a resistance of just 0.24, a number extremely low for an open cockpit racer. No front or rear wings, no aerodynamic devices, just a vertical fin that enables straight line stability. This car was an actual ground-to-ground missile. The downforce was instead generated by the Venturi tunnels on the floor, copied from the 1981 Eagle IndyCar design, conceptually a very similar car approach to
interesting.
the Deltawing. Everything was then powered by a particular engine, the Nissan Di-GT, an evolution of the direct injection turbocharged 1.6-liter inline-4 of the Nissan Juke, tuned to reach 300 brake horsepower. After all, with a car that weighted half of the competitors, a lot of power wasn't needed. An amazingly crafted idea that unfortunately didn't catch the interest of the IndyCar Association. But it did for the ALMS founder, Don Panoff, who saw an incredible potential in the project. He believed that the Deltawing carried the innovative spirit of Le Mans, and so convinced the then
For Le
ACO
Mans.
president, Jean-Claude Plessard, to let the Deltawing participate to the 2012 24-hour of Le Mans, representing Garage 56, a special racing class reserved for experimental cars, like in this case, the Deltawing. Out of the blue, the car was going to take part in the most prestigious race in the world of motor.
I don't know how Le Mans work. I mean, all I know is that it's 24 hours and drivers switch after like a good amount of hours, but I don't know if they like allow any car that you want, or if it's very like specific, like Formula One or something.
racing. And this was just the beginning. Just after the arrival in France, the entire team was immediately blown away from the media, the fans, and the entire paddock. Everyone
That
felt
jet
like
lag is so
something
cool.
coming from space had just landed on Earth. An absolute rock star at Le Mans, as Dan Gurney said. While everyone loved the car and couldn't wait to see it in action, some of the members of the Deltawing crew were a bit skeptical about the performance and reliability of the project. Marino Franchitti, first driver of the Deltawing for the 24-hour, believed that one of the biggest problems of the car was its gearbox, which had no hydraulics or control systems, meaning it was prone to reliability issues. The differential didn't work at all, and as a consequence, the car always drove with an open differential, compromising the overall handling. Despite that, Bowlby was extremely confident about the performance of his car. And he was right. During qualifying, the Deltawing managed to get a 29th place in the overall standings, even beating some of the participants.
Multiple category with strict regulation, but there's a special category for experimental vehicles.
LMP2s, an excellent result for a car of that kind. In the race, however, it showed some flashes of pace and performance, matching the times of the first LMP2s in class, while at the same time saving fuel. It was clear.
I don't know why I have this impression, like looking at it, that it would flip so easily because the nose being so small that, you know, I have this impression of like while trying to turn, the nose would like easily lift. I don't know. I mean, clearly it works, right? But it just makes you think that by not being like rectangular and kind of like even in design, it would easily like spin out or float.
To everyone that the car, despite being far from complete, had a massive potential to become something unique in the field of motor racing. However, the dream didn't last for so long. On the 6th hour, during a full course yellow, the Deltawing cracked at the Porsche curve after a contact with the Toyota number 7 driven by Nakajima. A mistake by the Japanese driver that cost all the hopes for the Deltawing crew and forced them to retire from the race.
Damn.
Despite that, Bowlby didn't give up and was optimistic for the future races of the car. But that's when the first real problems started to show up.
Funding, I assume.
The Deltawing managed to run a few more races in the same year, and it clearly caught the attention of racing manufacturers, especially at the 10 Hours of Road Atlanta of 2012. During the race, the car showed an extremely fast pace and had a concrete possibility to finish first. But as you might guess, competitors weren't so happy to see an unconventional car of that kind beating the majority of the grid. Some blamed the car was not legal at all, some said it wasn't eligible for any of the classes in the field. The newcomer wasn't well welcomed at all, and
Obviously, again, I don't really watch Motorsport outside of those videos, but man, that sounds so weird to me, like how insanely restrictive those categories seem. You know, like it's a race, so in my head it's like the fastest car wins, so who cares what it looks like? It's still a car, right? It's got 4 wheels, it's got an engine, you drive it with a wheel. So like, if it's faster than another car, you know, why are you complaining? But yeah, I'm not deep enough to really understand, you know, the logic.
Panoth, who at the time was an investor of the project and owner of the racing series the Deltawing race in, was aware of it. And so, in the effort to mediate a difficult situation like this, he made life a bit complicated for the team. A new set of improvised rules was written and applied exclusively to the Deltawing. Some of the obligations included starting from the pit, impossibility to start at the front of the field under full course yellow, and many others. Despite all of that, the car still finished 5th, but Lucas Ordonez recognized that the Deltawing had the potential to reach at least the podium, if it only would have been classified as a regular car without special rules and limitations. Unfortunately, things went a different way. After that, there was nowhere else for the car to race. No racing series or investors wanted to push for a project that most of the manufacturers saw as a threatening revolution. Bowlby didn't appreciate that at all.
It literally is like that in so many industries, right? Like, yeah, it's sport and entertainment and all that, right? But so many damn industries where, you know, the big established companies do everything they can to kill the new startup who have a better idea and promise for the future, but the big established company don't care for that, obviously.
And all of this finally triggered a litigious divorce with Panoth, his first and last main investor. That was the beginning of the end for the Deltawing project. Just a year later, in 2013, both Panoth and Bowlby decided to take 2 separated paths. The first took possession of the intellectual property of the project, and with the forces of his own team, improved the performance and reliability of the car with a new Mazda engine which powered 345 brake horsepower. The second instead joined forces with Nissan and produced a radical evolution of the project called Nissan Zio-RC, a closed cockpit hybrid electric version of the previous car, meant to
Close
race for the
cockpit, huh?
24-hour of Le Mans 2014.
Actually, now I'm wondering, like, if closed cockpit is allowed, why do open cockpit?
While Panot had some successes in 2013 in the ALMS Racing Series, taking some podiums, the same couldn't be said for Nissan. At Le Mans, they managed to achieve their goals of reaching a speed above 300 km an hour and completing a lap of the circuit using electric power only. However, after 5 laps into the 24 hours, the Z.RC was forced to retire because of a gearbox failure. After that, the project was immediately set aside to focus on the development of the Nissan GT-R LM Nismo, which resulted in a total failure. Bowlby kept a low profile since then, and shortly after, the Panot Deltawing became ineligible in IMSA Racing Series following rule changes. The Deltawing project at this point was officially part of the past. What's curious about the life cycle of the Deltawing is that it wasn't the
Man, rules, like, in sports, you know, there's some that make sense, some that, like, are definitely needed, but in so many sports, it seems like there's always rules that just really mess with the fun of the sport, and it's annoying. As always, I have to go on a tangent about the UFC, right? In the UFC, one of the things that's not allowed is, like, knees and kicks to a grounded opponent. So if someone is on the ground, you can't kick or knee them. And in other, like, organizations, like in Japan, it's allowed. And the problem that it causes in the UFC is that people who are really good at grappling, well, they have a massive advantage once they go to the ground, because they know that the other guy cannot do that. They can punch and elbow, but they can't use knees or kick to deal with the guy on the ground. And it gives a massive advantage. And it shows that in Japan, you know, without those rules, you know, those who play too much of the ground game, well, you know, they get destroyed, right? But yeah, you know, depending on, like, what series or what company or whatever it is, there's always some stupid rules that really, like, massively alter the way things play out. And some make sense sometimes, but some are really, like, you know, like, stuff that just kind of mess with the product or the sport or the entertainment, right? Like, the biggest reason it's like that in the UFC is because 20 years ago, the UFC was almost banned in the US because politicians were saying it was, like, you know, too barbaric and stuff like that. So they had to have rules like that, you know, like no knees to grounded opponent, no kicks and stuff like that. Yeah. Anyway, tangent.
concept to be the main reason for its failure. The car was great, fast, and at its peak, even reliable. Instead, it was the real world of motorsport which made intentionally and unintentionally everything in its power to suppress the project. A revolution
I hate
never
that.
was. Probably yes. Maybe not. We might never know. What we do know is that the Deltawing showed that the spirit of innovation, even with the strict rules and limitations of modern-day racing, is still real. Half the weight, half the fuel.
And again, like, this is so annoying because this doesn't encourage anybody else to try anything new except the already established company who are not afraid that, you know, they can be taken down, right? So, like, any other small company, I mean, they're just not gonna try anything new of fear of being, like, you know, kicked down by the higher company, right?
Half the power, half the drag, all the speed.
What a shame, no? What a bloody shame, no? And again, it might not even have been the greatest car, but yeah. Is that Ace Combat footage? Might be. Yeah. Good story, but man, it's freaking annoying, yeah. Seriously. Seriously. Alright. Some things are the same everywhere, you know? What a shame, no? Wish it turned out differently, is what I can say. Because man, it look cool. It seriously look cool. Like, it would be so awesome for some of those racing events to, again, like, not have bullshit like this happen where, like, innovation is looked down upon. And you know, you would have, like, so many different cars with so many different crazy design to see what works the best, yeah? You know, I don't know, could be cool. Could be cool. Okay, what do we watch next? Oh yeah, I was interested by this video right here. I saw it in my recommendation. We can watch this one. Previously unknown branch of life dominated Earth 400 million years ago. And yeah, that sounds kind of crazy, so I want to learn about that. By Anton Petrov.
Hello wonderful person, this is Anton, and today we're going to be discussing a kind of a follow-up to a very strange biological mystery, approximately 165 years in the making. Something that puzzled biologists for a very long time, and something that involves this somewhat strange organism you see in this image. An organism that actually dominated planet Earth for quite a long time, and way before the dinosaurs. But also an organism that was one of the largest in existence during this time. Much bigger, and actually dramatically larger, than any other organism around it. And well, this is referred to as a proto-tax.
Just looks like a stone pillar, yeah. Hello Yamato. Yeah, when continuing with this channel, not giving up. Huh? Thanks for coming over.
For decades, biologists believed they kind of figured out, but based on some of the recent groundbreaking discoveries, turns out they didn't. And turns out that these recent discoveries are actually even more mind-blowing. Because in this case, we might have discovered an entirely new lost kingdom of life. A type of an organism that basically did not make it and did not survive. Even though a lot of other stuff, including of course plants, fungi, and animals, did survive. Which makes this a pretty exciting discovery. Now just as a side note, we've actually discussed the previous version of this study approximately a year ago, and so what we're discussing today is actually kind of a follow-up / update. But because the study by Corentin Loron and the team you see right here has now been peer-reviewed and officially published, it obviously makes it so much more interesting because this is a groundbreaking discovery. But to understand why this is so important, but also why this is so strange, we have to look back at the period when all of this existed and basically try to imagine Earth as it was approximately 400 million years ago. This was the early Devonian period, technically referred to as the Age of Fishes. You can learn a little bit more about this in one of the videos in the description. But in essence, most of the life at this point was actually underwater. But during this era, some of the first terrestrial ecosystems started to be formed as well, but mostly involved extremely simple arthropods, or basically a lot of very primitive animals, including something resembling an insect, and very simple plants. So basically the surface of the planet looked very primitive. And most importantly, on land, there were no forests, with the largest plant, known as Cooksonia, only being something like 10 centimeters or a few inches tall. This was basically ankle-high moss. But rising out of this miniature landscape were these very massive pillar-like structures that could be up to 8 meters or 26 feet in height and towered over everything in the vicinity.
I mean, in a way, people say it all the time, right? You don't need to go outside of the planet to see stuff that feels alien. And yeah, this does feel alien. And even today, there's a lot of like creatures and stuff that feel alien. Yeah, this is something out of like No Man's Sky.
These were prototaxites, strange organisms that contained no branches, no leaves, no flowers, and were basically the giants of this era. And for over a century now, the question was basically, okay, so what exactly is this? With the first question being asked back in 1843. And this is when the first fossils were discovered, and by 1859, they started to be known as prototaxites, which basically just means first yew, kind of like the yew tree. And obviously because some of the earlier archaeologists actually thought these were tree trunks, giant partially rotten conifer trees from the age of the dinosaurs. But by 1872, a researcher named William Carruthers started to argue that these were actually very strange organisms, most likely made out of marine algae, or basically a kind of a chunk of seaweed that somehow ended up on land. And that's because the structure here did not resemble a tree and contained a lot of features that we don't expect from a typical plant. And here's actually roughly how this was imagined at first, with this image from 1888. This debate between the rotten tree trunk or some kind of a giant seaweed lasted for quite some time. Mostly because the fossils here did not have any of the clear features we expect from something like a plant. But in early 2000s, and specifically 2001, this debate sort of switched to a different proposition. These were now believed to be giant mushrooms. Because when looking at this structure under microscope, it seemed to be made out of millions of tiny interwoven tubes, which resembled a typical hypha, we find in modern mushrooms. And so for a typical fungus, we usually find something like this, or something like this. This is actually one of the most famous hypha from penicillin, the most important and the most famous fungus in existence. And while some of the prototaxites also seem to contain very similar features, but they were not exactly the same. But still, the fungus explanation made more sense, especially based on a lot of other studies, including this very recent one, that provides a lot of evidence that a lot of fungi occupied a lot of land environments hundreds of millions of years earlier than previously thought. As a matter of fact, fungi very likely predated plants and were possibly the first to colonize land. We'll actually discuss the study in a separate video because this is also kind of groundbreaking, but in essence here the fungus idea made a lot of sense, and especially because in 2007, additional studies using carbon isotopes revealed that prototaxites were not actually making their own food from sunlight like a typical plant. Instead, they seem to be heterotrophic, meaning that they absorbed organic matter in the soil very similar to a fungus. And so here we had direct confirmation that whatever this was, it was definitely not a plant and seemed to be somewhat similar to a fungus, except that this was a 20-foot tall fungus, much larger than anything that we have today. But as things usually happen in science, once we get new technology, certain older discoveries can be actually overturned. And that's actually what happened in 2025. This recent study...
It seems to happen a lot. I mean, in a lot of the video you guys have showed me of prehistoric or hundreds of million years ago science, they talk about that, right? A lot of stuff, you know, in just a decade is often overturned, yeah, often changed. Which is interesting, you know, like, so many times people will be convinced this is the answer, only to, you know, for that to completely be changed on its head later on, yeah. When will you visit Japan? One day, when I have money, one day, yeah. I don't think anytime soon, if I'm to be honest. I wish, but yeah, there's no way, right?
Now published in the Science Advances, completely challenged the fungus theory by focusing on an exceptionally well-preserved specimen of prototaxites discovered earlier in Scotland. And so here, by using the advanced technology involving 3D laser imaging and infrared spectroscopy, researchers were able to look much deeper inside the organism and analyze its molecular fingerprint better than ever before. And well, what they've discovered is a little bit surprising. First, let's discuss the anatomy. While fungi usually have a relatively simple network of tubes, as seen in some of these images, turns out that prototaxites possessed an extremely complex internal structure, with researchers discovering at least 3 different types of tubes that connected in dense hubs, now referred to as medullary spots. And that's not something that fungi contain. And here, by using 3D reconstruction, they saw that these tubes branched wildly and seemed to be interconnected in a way that modern fungi
it's kind of like coal, you know, underways are coal.
With some of these tubes even containing very strange internal rings, which researchers now believe might have been used for transportation of water and possibly gas. Once again, this is not something that fungi have, but surprisingly, this is what a lot of vascular plants have. Basically, this is something you expect from a tree. But the most important evidence came from the chemistry. Here, by comparing the chemical signature with many other fossils, including actual fossil of fungi from the same time, researchers realized that if this was a fungus, it should contain chitin, a very durable molecule that is actually used by a lot of insects, but that also makes up cell walls of all fungi. It's basically what gives fungi their structure and what prevents them from falling apart. And actually, even after 400 million years, we can still detect traces of chitin in most of the fossil fungi discovered in many different locations. And this is actually what's even seen in the fungus fossil discovered in the same rock that was literally growing next to this prototaxite. But the prototaxite sample from Scotland did not have any chitin and instead contained something very similar to lignin, which is actually better well known as the woody part of a typical plant. Although in this case it was not exactly the same structure and was slightly different in terms of chemical composition. And that was of course a somewhat surprising discovery. Here we had an organism that we thought was a mushroom, but seemed to contain certain features from plants and certain features that nothing else seems to have. Basically, this prototaxite lacked essential building blocks of fungi and did not match anatomy of plants or animals, which led to the new conclusion that this was possibly an entirely different kingdom of life and something that eventually went extinct. It was not a plant, it was not an animal, it was not a fungus.
I mean, extant, but at the same time, as he said, it shared some similarities to eventually fungi, eventually like trees and other plant life. So it went extinct, but a lot of the traits, I mean, I guess no, they didn't pass on because it went extinct, but you know, like life on Earth found a way to replicate those traits into, you know, a kingdom of life that actually survived, sustained, and evolved, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. It's like this branch of evolution of this, whatever you call it, you know, at the same idea, I guess, but not good enough to actually survive in a long time, yeah, or whatever.
It was something entirely different, a kind of a failed experiment. He was possibly dominant on Earth for a very long time, but eventually left no living descendants for one reason or another. And so right now this is a pretty exciting discovery because it essentially challenges our timeline of how we think life colonized the planet. Mostly because for a very long time it was always believed that plants were most likely the first, and were also most likely the dominant forms of life on the surface. But it turns out that before the trees even existed, we already had these very mysterious giants towering over all of the plants, and they were potentially extremely important because their fossils are quite prominent and seem to exist everywhere on the planet. As a matter of fact, based on their structure and potential function, we can actually assume that these were very important ecosystem engineers, or basically that they help distribute nutrients across various landscapes, and due to their sheer size also provided homes for some of the first land-dwelling insects and arthropods. As a matter of fact, researchers reported a lot of different boreholes in many different prototaxite fossils, and that of course suggests that these ancient bugs were living inside of them, and possibly were even eating them for millions of years, way before trees even existed. But during late Devonian, all of this went extinct. Nobody knows why, but today the assumption is that they were probably outcompeted by actual real trees. Trees that were very efficient at capturing sunlight and had to grow tall and basically cover everything in order to be successful. And so once the forests became prominent, prototaxites disappeared. And well, right now this is a pretty interesting evidence for all of this, for basically this fourth branch of life, but we do need additional studies and additional research to see if this actually makes sense. Right now this is just one team and one proposition, and though the giant mushroom theory is still the more widely explained explanation, based on the data and the analysis using molecular fingerprints and 3D imaging from this study, we now have a much more interesting and more complex tale involving something we didn't even know existed. A strange lost kingdom that once towered over everything else on Earth, only to one day disappear and leave us guessing about what exactly this was for 2 centuries. But we still have so much to learn about all of this, and there's still so much to discover about early Earth and how life on Earth colonized the surface. And it's this exciting mushroom study we're going to be discussing next, because the discovery from that study might even rewrite modern textbooks and our understanding of complex life on the surface. So we'll definitely come back and discuss all of this in some of the future videos. Until
T'as le plaisir. This seems to be it for that part. As I always said, like I wonder, like in 50 years, you know, with how fast technology has advanced over the last 50 years. So like yeah, in another 50 years, yeah, like how much of what we think is right today will have been proven wrong by advancing technology, research, and discoveries. Yeah, I mean, yeah. A good thing would be like, if I'm still around in 50 years, I'll do a YouTube video trying to find some textbook from like 2010 and comparing it to textbook of 2050 to see how much has changed. I guess I'll do that in 50 years, you know, when I'm like a 77-year-old YouTuber, I'll be doing that. Remind me in 50 years, guys, if you're still around, remind me to do that video on YouTube at 10. I'll do that. Very interesting. I always find it fascinating, this kind of stuff. Even if, you know, some of the information right now might be wrong, you know, just the idea of it is really interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, good stuff. Science is eternally interesting. That's for sure. Okay, let's watch a last video for today. We could watch another car video, but I kind of feel like watching something different. So you can always try it again next time if you want, Clément. I have this one. I have this one. You know what? Abandoned Mall. I'm interested. Abandoned Westminster Mall, California, by Bright Sun Films. Maybe some urban exploration. I like
Just
this kind of
outside
videos.
Los Angeles, California, down Interstate 405, past Long Beach and south of Anaheim, is the Westminster Mall in the town of Westminster. It was a mall which opened with great fanfare and success through the later half of the 20th century. But that success would later change by the 2020s, and following its unceremonious closure, the mall had been completely trashed
Damn.
beyond recognition. So today, let's take a look at what happened here, from the mall's golden years to the decline and later abandonments.
Man, COVID killed so many things, I mean. So many business, so many malls.
This is the Westminster Mall.
And so many people.
For decades prior to the mall, this was open rural land. Not a ton around, just some small farms and single-family homes. In fact, following World War II, a Japanese couple would actually set up what would become the world's largest goldfish farm here. That would eventually change though. By the 1960s, much of the surrounding land had now been populated by master plan neighborhoods. With a quickly growing middle class and subsequent suburban sprawl, the San Diego freeway was also now being constructed. This portion
I think it's not only COVID. Yeah, I mean, people seem to have messed it up too, I guess. But maybe those people had COVID, so you could say, you know, COVID killed the mall.
known as Interstate 405. This remaining farm area now made it the perfect developable plot of land. And what better to build than something that had been sweeping across suburban America? In 1972, the Hormart Development Company, which was the nation's second largest mall developer and actually owned by Sears, announced a new shopping center for the city of Westminster. Marketed in the local press as a Sears-built shopping center, the Westminster Mall, as it was now officially named, was promised to be the largest of its kind in Orange County, California.
It's a big boy.
Upon its 93-acre site, the mall would contain 4 anchor stores: Robinson's, Mays, Buffum's, and of course, Sears. The interior of the mall would be populated by over 150 smaller retailers, while the out parcels would feature a cinema and other tenants. So, after 2 years of construction, the 1.2 million square
Always known for that culture of American mall, right? Like in, well, maybe less these days, but in more classic American movies, you know, like malls that have this very special presence, right? Like they're massive, there's so much you can do, so many variety of shop and all that. You know, in France we also have malls, but they're not quite the same. Like where I live right now, there's one, you know, like there's a massive area where you can buy groceries, and then you have like rows of like little shop from like a video game store, a clothing store, like hairstylists and stuff like that, right? But it's still probably like, you know, like 1/10 of those legendary American massive malls, right? Which, you know, they have such a kind of longing reputation, you know? Yeah. This is the US, the economic rivalry can be nasty.
foot Westminster Mall had officially opened to the public on August 7th, 1974. Quite a large grand opening had been held, with civic leaders making speeches, a full band commemorating the ceremony, and customers lining outside the doors. It was reported that the entire enormous 6,600 car parking lot was pretty much full, and it was easy to see why this opening was met with such enthusiastic fanfare. Westminster Mall was a peak example of 1970s shopping center design. Across the multi-level complex, shoppers would not only find plenty of stores, but they would also find lush foliage, beautiful bespoke sculptures, and cozy sunken lounge areas. Its vast pyramid-style center court spanned...
What is this, Hogwarts? Why does it look like this? It's like the Hogwarts stairways that are moving, you know?
3 levels, with various elevated bridges and staircases, some lined with red carpets. It was an impressive piece of architecture, some of the most impressive many local shoppers had ever encountered. By 1982, Sears had sold the mall to an out-of-state management firm who were already looking to upgrade the property, looking to what they called bring the mall into the 1980s. So in 1987, they announced a 2.5-year major renovation to the entire structure. Everything would be modernized, including a new food court area, a redesign of the center court, complete with new tiled floors, a glassed enclosed elevator, and even more retail space, which would occupy the wide open area of that center court. Charlotte Russe would be the main tenant for this new area. This $10 million renovation proved to be pretty popular too, as Westminster Mall
Looks
was
nice.
now the second highest grossing retail center in the county. By the 1990s, the mall was continuing on with pretty good success. While some anchors were
Citizen
taking
well-being.
mainly
I mean, that's like that in a lot of countries, I think. Yeah.
due to the May Company merger, JCPenney would take over the former Robinson space, and by the dawn of the new century, Macy's would actually construct a brand new anchor space in 2002. They would only stay there for a rather short time though, as they would then move to a different anchor space in the mall, with Target now taking their place. When Target came in, the mall owners would actually split up their land and sell the store itself and surrounding parking lot to Target outright. They would eventually do this for other parcels of land as well. By this point, the mall's ownership had actually been changed once again, now with the Simon
Dinosaur.
Property Group taking over. They would also embark on a $10 million renovation.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. What are we doing? Like, are we dumping on the US for everything they do wrong right now? I guess it is. If there's a time to do it, it's right now, yeah. I get it. Yeah, US cars are... They're not safe, that's to be sure, yeah. I mean, they're just too big, that's the thing.
Hoping to modernize the entire property,
Bigger doesn't always mean better, and I mean, you know, it's probably the same with some of the malls, right? Like, they die eventually because they were too big, and eventually as, like, economy and population change, I guess, you know, they can't adapt because they're just too big in the first place, yeah. So, that's the problem with a lot of the US stuff, it's just too big.
to attract more upscale tenants. While the last renovation may have taken the mall into the 1980s, this one was going to take them into the 2000s. This massive renovation happened in 2008, and Simon continued to make improvements, focusing on the interior of the mall, sprucing up decorations, adding in a children's play area, and even a carousel. By the time this renovation was complete, the country was now reeling from the nationwide financial crisis, and the mall itself was now a modern, yet pretty bland looking space. Worse yet for the property, total sales within was way down, sliding from second to now 8th place in Orange County by 2012. Occupancy was sliding too. More stores continued to close through the years, and even with an 85% occupancy rates, Westminster still had the lowest occupancy rate in the area. In fact, many of the former big-name tenants inside Westminster had moved to other shopping areas in the area, places like the enormous South Coast Plaza, with it only being a 15-minute...
So just make something bigger. Fair enough. Fair enough. So it died because it wasn't big enough. That's the moral of the story.
drive away. Why would any customer make the trip out to Westminster when South Coast had so much more variety and was arguably a nicer place to spend your time? Not to mention that this is Southern California, where the need for a climate-controlled indoor shopping mall is not all that necessary. And even in the direct surrounding areas of Westminster, you can find all types of strip retail and attractive outdoor plazas. With lower foot traffic in the building, it was beginning to become much harder to attract big brand names. And as such, the vicious cycle continued, all as Westminster Mall began to earn a dead mall reputation. Now that's certainly not to say that
Wasn't COVID then. COVID was the final blow.
this was a completely dead mall. The property still had plenty of stores and people walking around, but the signs were there, mainly for lease signs. By 2018, as a part of the company's continued financial issues, Sears, one of the original stores and the original developer, had closed their anchor location. By now, Simon Property Group had spun off a division of their company called Washington Prime Group. This new corporate entity would now operate the slowly dying mall. But this owner wouldn't be in the greatest financial condition, as by the time the pandemic hit in 2020, they would later file for bankruptcy. Westminster Mall, in an already declining state, was obviously heavily affected by the pandemic, seeing a massive decrease in foot traffic and sales. Layoffs and store closures would all plague the mall through 2021. Developers knew that something had to be done with the property, and already architectural firms were being hired to draw up potential redevelopment plans. First with the idea of demolishing only two of the potential...
I mean, I definitely like the one on the left because they plan to add a lot more greenery, which is, I feel like, always a good choice. Yeah. The one on the right doesn't do enough. Like, there's a little bit of green, but it's not enough. Yeah.
Redevelopment plans. First, with the idea of demolishing only 2 of the anchor tenants and using the lots to build out dense residential. It was thought that by adding a mix of housing and commercial, essentially attached to the existing mall structure, it would reinvigorate the dying property. This idea expanded into something even larger by 2022, as a new plan was developed by the city council. This one would essentially redevelop the vast parking lot and densify a series of residential buildings, potentially building out up to 3,000 new homes. City council would ultimately approve this framework for development. They just needed someone to actually make the investment. Meanwhile, California-based developer Shop Off Realty Investments had acquired the empty Sears parcel as well as the flanking Macy's parcel. They wanted to build out their own development, dubbed Bolsa Pacific at Westminster, and this would follow a similar design which previously had been proposed, one that would build out a hotel and several residential structures. While these plans were announced in 2023, very little movement had actually been made on the development thereafter. Within the mall, very few brand name stores still operated inside, and that number would only continue to decline. In 2025, Westminster would lose both Macy's, which would close in March, and JCPenney, which announced they would be closing permanently by the end of the year. With 2 more major anchor tenants now closing, Washington Prime Group, which still owned the majority of the property, had clearly seen the writing on the wall. With the aging structure and continued pushes for redevelopment, the mall
It's so massive, and again, like, I was thinking about earlier, like, where I live right now, it's a pretty small town. I mean, there's a couple thousand people, right? And you know, there's a mall kind of place, yeah. But it's still like just 1/10 of this, and it still feels kind of massive, right? Like when you get into one of the side entrances, it still takes like 5 minutes maybe to walk to the main grocery area, right? The massive main grocery area, as you walk in front of all the store. But it's still like, you know, looking at the image, yeah, like it's still so tiny compared to all this. I mean, yeah, it's like being in a full city, this giant like US mall.
Life support. While the company gave no official indication as to the financial state of the property, it's easy to infer that the rising costs to operate the building and the decrease in tenant income were more than enough reasons to shutter it for good. After giving a notice to all remaining tenants that their leases would expire in October, Westminster Mall officially closed for good on October 29th, 2025. JCPenney would stay open a few more weeks as it slowly liquidated its inventory. It would close in November, while Target, the only remaining anchor store left, continued to do good business and claimed that they would continue to operate into the near future. The rest of the property, however, was shuttered and now effectively abandoned. This meant that in the middle of a massive metropolitan area, there was an abandoned mall, one which was rather easy to get inside of. Early videos inside following the closure showed...
I was about to say, like, it just, you know, if I live close to there and I was like a dumb kid, I would love to try to get inside and explore, you know? Like, there's something about something like this that just makes you want to explore, yeah?
the structure in pretty good condition. The power remained on inside the building, with signs that were still illuminated across the silent, open space. Only some storefronts and glass had minor spray-painted graffiti, while the owners had removed the carousel from the Macy's wing. Squatters had taken up refuge inside the disheveled former storefronts and began scrapping copper and other materials. Everything else was left exactly as it was the day the mall closed, even leaving behind the full trampoline park. This suspended animation of the structure wouldn't last forever, though. With reportedly only a single security car periodically circling the property, the massive building was more or less easy enough to get into. And boy, did people get in. Reports claim that the mall had various doors which were just left
is one guy going to like secure all this? Like seriously.
Unlocked. And with the general Los Angeles reputation for tagging, word quickly got out on how easy it was to get inside the mall. In a matter of just 3 weeks, I'm not kidding, the mall went from looking like this to this. Obviously, a lot of people started getting into the structure. Kids,
Man, I do like tagging. I think like the tagging style can look good, but it just depends where you do it. And obviously, like, yeah, I don't like this. I don't like this. Like, this looks terrible. Yeah. Like, who cares, you might say. I'm not like saying, you know, I'm sad for like the rich owners of this mall or something. That's not what I'm saying, but just aesthetically, this looks like shit.
vandals, taggers, and artists. It was an absolute free-for-all. And in just 20 days, it looked like the apocalypse had occurred. While the pitch black anchor stores had some graffiti,
like they didn't just tag, they trashed the place. Like what the fuck? Huh? They broke the windows and everything. Man.
it looked like the apocalypse had occurred. While the pitch black anchor stores had some graffiti and fallen down ceiling tiles, the condition within wasn't too bad. It wasn't until you entered the main mall concourse where the true destruction was. Basically, every easily accessible surface had been tagged by someone.
And it's so stupid to do this too, because like, you know, if you live in like this is people who live in this city, right? And sure, the place is abandoned for now, but you know, it's not like it was in a terrible state. There was potential that, you know, it could come back. But now with the amount of damage and cleaning up there would be to do with all this, I mean, you know, it probably kills it forever. As like no one would like it would probably be even more expensive for like anyone to invest in trying to revive this place and make it into something good for the city. So again, it's like residents of the city literally fucking themselves by doing this. And I'm sure they're not thinking about that, right? But yeah, like this place is now doomed.
While everything else had been destroyed by vandals. Shop windows had been completely smashed in, furniture had been piled in one of the concourses, and pretty much every fire extinguisher had been set off. Photos inside showed a ghostly haze in the air from all the dust. What's especially crazy about all of this, especially from an urban exploration perspective, was that the building was still relatively clean. The skylights are still intact, the floors aren't pooling with water, the walls aren't moldy. I mean, there's still power on inside. Yet the whole building, in terms of tagging and destruction...
It literally, like, it looks like a level in The Last of Us. Like, zombie apocalypse happened 20 years ago and it became like this. And yet, you're telling me this took like a month?
Looks like it's been abandoned for a decade and a half. All of this is happening, mind you, while Target on the other side of this wall is still very much in business. Even the outside has clear signs of destruction, right down to the main entrance sign, which has graffiti all over it, with the exterior glass all smashed out. Clearly, local officials had had enough. Westminster police had already said they had gotten over 400 calls of people inside, with individuals who had been inside claiming that they had seen up to 60 people inside the mall at one time, which is insane. At the end of the day, this many people inside an abandoned...
Filming and posting on social media is not very smart. Why? Because police watch social media. I mean, I wish it was that easy, right? You would think, but I feel like in a lot of cases like this, they probably won't face consequences, right? Yeah. Yeah.
abandoned structure that is this well known is probably a recipe for disaster. It's effectively a lawless place in there. While this was all happening, Shop-Off Realty Investments, the company which owned the Macy's and Sears lots, had actually started to make big moves on the site. They would ultimately acquire the remaining 57 acres of land, including the entire mall itself. By combining all of their already purchased parcels, they were now proposing a new plan. This one would effectively clean sheet the site, tearing down the existing mall and build...
Gather the video to show to the judge and court can punish hard. Again, I feel like in 90% of the case that won't happen.
building out a mixed-use master plan community. This would all be made up of low and mid-density residential housing, a hotel, some commercial, trails, and a small park, all while constructing a new Target building and lots. With the whole site in their possession and city council already on board with rezoning the land, the new developers had very few roadblocks and were ready to get to work. A
So
chain
just
link
demolish
fence
the
was
place.
erected around the property on January 13th. and by February 2026, crews were already inside, securing the structure, tearing out the carpet, and gutting out the former anchor stores, starting with the former Macy's. Shopoff says that by spring, actual demolition of the building will start, marking the end of the 51-year-long history of the shopping mall. And what a journey it has been. Westminster Mall started out as the classic suburban mall experience, one which featured luxurious, striking interiors and all of the iconic retailers you could want, from the Disney Store to Sears. But of course, that interior would change over time, and as other developers continued to build retail basically unchecked, and as online retail drew shoppers away, many of those big brand name draws either closed their doors or moved to other spots that could provide the shoppers. Westminster just wasn't successful as a mall at a lower occupancy rate with low-end stores, which really meant its closure was almost set in stone by the 2010s. And it really did die a quiet death. In the making of this video, I'm actually shocked at how little has been documented and archived of this property. Just finding photos and videos from inside was tedious. But at the same time, I know for a fact that so many have shared memories here. But when it's all said and done, I think what truly will cement this mall's legacy are the few weeks that followed its closure. The sheer insanity which occurred inside the building through January 2026. A shocking free-for-all which made national news and came as quite a shock for local residents. It's honestly very similar to what happened to Oceanwide Plaza in downtown Los Angeles. A series of towers which, left unchecked, allowed all kinds of people to leave their mark on it. In the end, I think through its 51-year-long history, there might be no better physical representation of the fall of the American Mall than this. If you like this video or learned something new,
I feel like, again, I don't watch them too often, but YouTube often recommend me video like this about, like, you know, dead malls and urban exploration of them. And, you know, they seem to be dying faster and faster in the US right now. Which makes sense, you know, like online shopping versus going to the location and all that. So, but yeah, interesting video. I mean, again, in the end, it seems like it doesn't matter because they were gonna destroy it anyway. So like whatever, that they tagged the place and destroyed everything. But I still don't feel like it, you know, like it really doesn't matter that much. But you know, it just like feels like I don't like it. Yeah, in the end, it's really it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth, right? Yeah. It's just a place, but again, as they said, like a lot of people had memories and stuff like that. So like putting it in this state before it gets destroyed is kind of messed up, I feel like, yeah. I don't really like urban exploration stuff, you know. Even though there's only one channel that I rewatch, which I often share on Discord, called Shie. I love his stuff. I've been watching it for like many years. Oh, I've watched this video before, Yamato. I have a reaction on the channel actually. Like he just had a new video, like going to a ghost town in Germany, and you know, it's the type of urban exploration channel I like because you know, technically he's doing something illegal, right? He's trespassing on a lot of places, but he doesn't really like break anything or steal anything or tag anything, you know. And he really gets into a lot of like really cool place. Like in this most recent video, he goes into like a giant crane kind of location. Where is it? Can I find it? Oh yeah, it's this thing, like this giant, like crazy digging crane machine, and it's just really
I am definitely
interesting stuff.
Coming through one of these, probably down.
Yeah, I don't know. I like Urbex video when you know someone is not just there to like destroy stuff or take stuff, I guess. Yeah, but I do know that a lot of Urbex channel, like they don't care, right? They just go. Like it's abandoned, so I can destroy everything. I feel like is what they think, yeah. So yeah, really good video. We learned quite a bit about this mall. Here's the link. Let me link you the video, Yamato. We did a reaction before, yeah. Keep the stupid American cars out of Europe. Let me find it for you. Where is it? Right here. Yep, as you can see, I did a reaction before. Okay, but yeah, that was the last video for today. We'll leave it at that. But yeah, we'll do this again, obviously. Except now, because, you know, the main channel is dead. Well, it's dead tomorrow. And this channel is now the normal main channel. it means that now the clips from this stream will be posted on another channel. If you're interested, I mean, maybe you're not because you watched the live anyway. Or you shared another video, yeah. Maybe I'll watch it next time. I'll keep it for next time, don't worry. So yeah, I'll be posting now the clip video from today on a different channel. Which I guess I should link. I do have it linked somewhere, I think. Which is also like the new backup channel now. If this one, if I goes down, I guess this is the new one. It's this one, ExoticBankai Extra Reaction, which is actually a 10-year-old channel. You can actually see the first few videos on this channel are from 9 years ago from me. There was actually a lot more video on this channel, but I privated them because they were kind of shit. I only left like 3 of the ones that you know, are kind of like fine, I guess, even though they're very short. But yeah, I'll post the clip video on that one from now on. Again, tomorrow is actually the deadline. Tomorrow is when the main channel goes down. I'm not really ready for it. I'm definitely kind of scared of what's gonna happen because, you know, I'm stupidly afraid that like once YouTube delete that account, they will actually go after my other account, including this one. Maybe I'm paranoid for no reason. You know, it happens to YouTube all the time, right? Losing a channel and just making another one. But I can't help but be a little bit afraid, you know. We'll see what happens. Anyway. And yeah, tomorrow, to take my mind off things, I'm doing reaction to Super Kaguya-hime, I think. It's a recent anime movie that's very popular. I'll be watching that. Come watch the reaction if you want. But yeah, thank you guys for the reaction, for the videos as always. Hope you enjoyed the stream. Master Report is still a thing. Like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys next time. See you.